The story begins with a man who says he was born a slave, an imperial guard who died defending a mad emperor who ultimately made a pact with a demon. He wonders whether he will be remembered as a knight who remained loyal until the very end, or perhaps as a foolish failure who was unable to read the signs of the times. In the end, neither option satisfies him. Later, we are introduced to Cain, an imperial guard of the emperor. He says it would be cleaner to simply disappear from everyone's memory. But we see a man asking why he turned his blade at the last moment, and calling him an idiot. This is the rebel leader named Gallo Reston. He calls Cain an idiot. Cain says he was born an orphan and has lived 29 years making his own choices, and he shouldn't have started a fight for no reason. Gallo says he could have run away and asks why he made that choice. He starts crying, telling him to open his eyes, calling him a bastard, and shaking him. But Cain is already too far gone, as life has already left his eyes. We see him walking in some kind of watery afterlife. The sky looks like a Van Gogh painting, and he asks if this is what death looks like. Cain walked on and said that it was not much for freedom, as it seems he could walk forever. And yet seeing Galo cry so much, it was nice to know that someone cared about him. But he says he can handle it himself and decides to enjoy his so-called freedom. But suddenly he is distracted by something. A blue aura begins to form in front of him. He turns around, wondering what it is, and it flies right into his eye. He is confused, and, as if washing away the image, he opens his eyes to see a man who looks very much like Halo, who says that he was born healthy and calls him Karen. Karen is confused, and the man looks at the child's father, asking if he wants to hold him. The man picks him up, saying that he is not even crying and that he is a strong boy. Karen is still trying to figure out what is going on, and the man tells him to grow up strong and healthy, adding that he can't wait to see what his youngest grandson is capable of. Karen recognizes him as Gallo, saying that it is definitely him, only now he is old and wrinkled. Karen starts to cry, and Gallo says he didn't mean to make him cry. Karen tries to understand, asking if he really has become Gallo's grandson. Some time passes, and we hear a man say that the knight Cain, who later met his death alongside the emperor 45 years ago, although he was unable to keep his master from the wrong path, has come down to us as a symbol of unwavering loyalty, standing with his legion to the end. This concludes the last opinion of their society on contemporary history. The teacher turns and asks the young gentleman what he thinks. We see Karen asking first what his teacher's view is on this. The professor says that, in his opinion, the Grand Duke simply wanted to restore his friend's honor. After all, the story that Duke Gallo and Lord Cain were friends is well known. Karen asks if he really thinks that's the case, and the professor asks what he means. Karen says that, in his opinion, his grandfather harbored resentment towards his dead friend, and that is why he deliberately embellished his name. He was reborn as Karen Reston, the third son of Gallo and the only child of Count Peel. The professor asks what he is talking about. Karen says that because his grandfather, instead of joining him on the path of revolution, cannot accept that, regardless of Karen's will, which was to die peacefully rather than be called a hero. The professor asks what he means by a peaceful death, saying that, of course, there are records that the duel between them ended too quickly for people with such skills, but these are only rumors. Assuming that Cain chose death rather than joining his friend in a deadly battle or in the revolution, it makes sense, but he cannot believe that such a statement was made by a 10-year-old child. Karen asks what he thinks. The professor says that if he agrees with this opinion, the knights of the duchy may accuse him of blasphemy and kill him. Hesitating, he gives a politically correct answer that he has never considered such a point of view before. Karen laughs, saying he is just joking, and asks why he looks so scared. The teacher is very intimidated after this prank. He explains that his name is now Karen, and, as we can see, he is currently the youngest grandson in the Duchy of Reston. It took him a while to piece the situation together, but in the end, he is now Gallo's grandson. And he asks how that bastard dared to make him a hero, saying that he should have understood even without his words. We see his father sitting calmly at the table with his arms folded, and Karen introduces him as Pyle, Gallo's youngest son, and that he is his father. Karen clears his throat, and Peel asks if his lesson is over. He says yes, asking if he prayed again, and if his father is still worried about his awakening ceremony. His father is surprised that he noticed and apologizes. Karen asks what he is apologizing for, and his father says that, unlike his two uncles, he never awakened his magical power, so he is worried that he may have passed this burden on to him. Karen puts his hand on his father's shoulder and says that no matter what anyone says, he is the best father to him. His father was very moved and hugged him tightly, saying that he was the best son, and pinches his cheeks. He asks what he would like for dinner, and of course Karen replies meat. That night he lay in bed, tossing a stone in the air, and thinking very intently about the awakening ceremony. He remembers how Gallo talked to him about it, and that it is a family ritual to reveal one's innate magical power. Karen says that means it's something you're born with, like a silver spoon in your mouth, and he doesn't care. Gallo tells him that not everyone can awaken, and even if he does, it does not mean that he is qualified to become the head of the family. In addition, they say that there is a secret that is only passed on to the head. Karen, intrigued, asks what it is, a treasure or a grimoire. Gallo says that if it's something like that, he might be interested. Karen says only a little, but he would like to live quietly somewhere in the wilderness. Gallo laughs, and Karen asks if he is mocking his modest dream, reminding him that he has a weapon in his hand. Gallo says okay, and promises that when the protagonist becomes the leader, he will tell him the secret. Returning to the present, Karen says that the ritual no longer matters. Beginning to emit a blue aura, he tells his father not to worry, as he has already completed his awakening of magic. And we learn that this was done a long time ago. The next day in the city, his father asks if he is amazed, and Karen says yes, as it is his first time on a train. They are at the train station. His mother says that much of the technology used was made possible thanks to his father's sponsorship. Karen says he knew that, but Pale says his wife is just flattering him. She says that even if he says so, it's really great, and he knows it. Karen says of course and tells his father that he is proud of him, and it's true. This man may not have awakened magic, but he single-handedly supports 30% of the duchy's finances. With his kind mother and devoted father, he thinks that they are perfect parents, so things aren't so bad after all. The next moment, they board the train and ride along the tracks. Karen looks out the window and notices something very strange that greatly surprises him. The main estate of the Reston family, the huge and beautiful, magnificent fortress of the Azure Sea. He looks at it all and understands why they are going there and what to expect. There he will see his grandfather again, as well as his old friend Gallo, and now he will be able to fully express his past personality. He smiles, saying that he made him a great historical figure, but he will become the complete opposite, realizing that all his worries are in vain, and that he will become someone unworthy of the family name, the biggest headache in their lives, the worst nightmare, the most rabid dog in the history of the Reston family. His father also sees his aura after waking up. Karen tells his old friend to wait for him, as his precious grandson is already on his way. The train finally arrives at the station, and when they get off, the old man greets them, saying that he has finally arrived and that it has been a long time. Pale says that about a year has passed, asking if he has been well, and we learn that his name is Heinrich. He says that thanks to the Duke's mercy, he has always been well. Karen asks if the knights staring at him are from the Knights of the Sea Wave. He says that they have already noticed that he has awakened his mana, and they are definitely different from the guys on their territory. Although it is to be expected that this is the case, it is only a matter of time before Gallo hears about it, but that does not matter. Heinrich says he will take them to the main palace now, and Pale asks him to lead the way. As soon as they go inside, the woman tells Karen that the Count has asked him to wait here while he greets the family elders and to call if he needs anything. He thanks her and says that it's just a reception room, but it's huge and that the Azure Sea Fortress is really something. But there's nothing to do here. Maybe he should have asked them to take him to the library. Someone laughs at him as he looks at the city, saying that going to the library immediately upon arriving at the main house is just like the rumors say. He's a real mama's boy. Karen turns around, wondering who this kid is, and the kid says that since he's his uncle's son, the chances of him waking up are slim, so he'd better hit the books. If he wants to make a lot of money like commoners, he has to be like his father. Karen starts to get angry, and the kid flinches and asks what's wrong. And if he really wants to fight, he says he'll use a little of his magic to show him a preview. Karen looks fierce, asking if there is a mad dog growing in the main house. The boy begins to realize that he may have started the fight for no reason, and says it can't be, realizing that Karen is releasing his aura. He asks when he woke up because his father didn't say anything about it. Karen says that of course his father didn't say anything, since even his own father doesn't know yet, and, more importantly, they have a problem. There's no need for two mad dogs in one house. He will take on that role himself and tells him to step aside. The kid asks what he's talking about, and Karen says that given this, it's time for him to finally get a beating. The scene switches. The elders are holding a meeting, discussing that Karen has awakened and that the three captains of the Night Order have already confirmed this when they accompanied him to the station. The Reston family elders discuss this, and the second young gentleman, Ringo, says, "Just think, he has awakened magical power, and didn't even tell the main family. I wonder what Pale is up to." Pale says, "Of course not, he didn't even know." The first son, Tails, tells Ringo to stop his groundless speculation, since Pale's magical power has not been awakened, so it's understandable that he didn't notice. Ringo calls him pathetic. Everyone else remains silent in confusion. A man bursts into the room, telling Heinrich that he needs to come quickly. Heinrich asks what happened, and the man is worried, wondering how to explain it. Even the three brothers wonder what is going on. We see Ringo running after the butler, who turns to the second young gentleman, and Pale says that there must be a misunderstanding. Ringo's face fills with anger and blood then, when he sees his son beaten up, sprawled out on the sofa. Karen goes to greet him, and Ringo grabs him by the collar, asking how he dares not know his manners, asking what the hell he was doing, and what he was thinking to do such a thing. Pyle tells him to stop, and Karen says the reason is simple. Leo insulted his father, and if it were his father, he would never have stood by and done nothing. Ringo says he's talking nonsense, and Pyle puts his hand on his shoulder, saying that's enough. Ringo tells Pyle to back off, saying that the son is acting this way because of his poor upbringing. Heinrich abruptly appears in the frame and approaches them, telling them all to stop, because the head of the family says he will pass judgment on the boy himself. Pale grabs Karen, asking his brother if he heard him, and demands that he let go. He asks if he is okay, and Karen says he is fine. Heinrich says they should all go together, and Ringo still looks annoyed. Pale says they should go too, and Karen says yes. And a lot of time has passed, and he will finally meet Gallo. In his office, Gallo asks what the reason was for causing such a huge incident immediately upon arrival. Pale is about to explain, but Gallo says he wasn't asking him. He wants to hear the answer directly from his son. He knows that Pale is not so reckless as to cause problems, and that he raised his son not to cause problems without thinking about the consequences, so there must be a reason, and he wants to know every detail. Karen is surprised that he will listen to him before punishing him, saying that such generosity does not suit him, and tells him that it is because Leo insulted his father. Ringo asks him to tell the truth, and Halo slams his fist on the table, telling him to shut up and asking how he dares to raise his voice. Ringo quickly cowered like a puppy and apologized. Gallo says they can call Leo and confirm the facts by asking Heinrich if Leo's treatment is finished. He says yes, and he will bring him immediately. Gallo says that's not the only thing he wanted to ask Karen. Karen says that if he is asking about his magical power, he awakened it 3 years ago. Pale and his brothers are surprised, and Gallo asks why he has kept it from his father until now. For him to do it on his own 3 years ago is madness. Karen says that he only realized it was magical power after reading a book later and learning about it. He decided it was better to keep it a secret. Gallo asked why, and Karan says that having a secret is fun, and it was even more fun because the knights in his territory had no idea either. Gallo asks if that's really all, and Karen says yes. At that moment, the door opens, and the butler announces that young Master Leo is all ready. The butler brings in Leo, covered in bandages. Gallo asks if it's true that he insulted his uncle. Leo hesitates to answer, and Karen makes a scene, saying that although his cousin mocked his father, despite this, he should not have hit him, and he has committed a sin. Leo says he never said that, but he has a panic attack from Karen's aura. He becomes terrified and agrees to everything. Gallo asks if this is true, and Leo says yes. All the adults immediately turn on him. Gallo says, "I see, and for now, since the awakening ceremony is tomorrow, he will postpone the punishment of both until it is over, and they should remember this while they are free." Then Halo asks Heinrich what he thinks of Pale's son. He says he is not sure about other things, but he felt many aspects that would be interesting. Gallo says he agrees. Not only did he awaken his magical power on his own, but he also hid it until now. Moreover, he seems to have questioned the skill level of the knights assigned to his father's territory, as if subtly hinting that by appointing such incompetent people, he was neglecting them. Heinrich says he's overthinking it, but Gallo says he'd like that to be the case. But this child is different, and he will find out what is special about him tomorrow. After all, they cannot know everything simply from the fact whether he has awakened his magical power or not, whether he will pass the awakening ceremony safely tomorrow or not, and what he will receive there. He is incredibly curious to find out. This takes us to the forest outside the city, deeper and deeper into the forest toward the light. And there, among the trees, we see an altar, which glowed. This must be where the ceremony will take place. The next day at night, near the fortress, we see all the family members going into the forest. Karen says that the elders of the Reston family have retired from active service, but he feels that they are all incredibly strong, and that Tails, Gallo's eldest son, and his daughter Leon are here, as well as Ringo and his second son Leo are also going with them. Since the whole family made such a fuss, it must be more important than he originally thought. Now that they are all standing together before the altar, and Karen looks at him, asking if it is the Stone of Oaths. Gallo adjusts his clothes and says it's time to begin the ceremony, and that when he passes through the rift opened by the stone, a world will unfold before him, which the Stone of Oaths will show him. They say that the world shown by the Stone of Oaths is different for each person, and the ceremony will end. When he uses the weapon he receives there to destroy that world, Karen says he is ready, and Halo simply looks at him before deciding that it is time. And finally, he raises the amulet, wishing it luck. When the connection with the Stone of Oath begins, a strange energy is released. A rift opens, looking as if the world inside is some kind of simulation. The way it loads, but time and space themselves begin to tear apart. The pressure is strong enough to make them prepare. Gallo asks him what he is doing and if he is afraid. Pale also turns to his son and asks if he is okay, and Karen says that everything is fine. He has gone and will be back very soon. He began to enter the rift and thought about using the weapon he will obtain in the world on the other side to destroy it, and it will be easy, since breaking things has always been his job. When he enters, Halo looks proud, but warns him to overcome his fear. And before fully entering the Matrix, Karen once again thought about Gallo's words about fear. The others watch as the rift gradually closes after he enters, and when he teleports inside, he stops glowing. Karen instantly recognizes this place, this day, these events, and even the smell of this place. He finds himself on the day of the Empire's revolution, when everything around him is engulfed in flames and blood. The protagonist himself appears in the image of the Emperor of the Empire he served. Around him were piles of soldiers' bodies. Karen walked on and wondered why he was seeing this, and why, of all places, this one had surfaced from his memories. It was trying to make him feel guilty by showing him his innocent comrades. As he approached the steps leading to the throne room, he heard a voice, saying that his world is cruel and desolate, calling him the child of the Blue Wolves. They say that the time of the covenant has come, so they will fulfill what was agreed with his ancestor. The door opens and someone comes out of it. Karen is immediately shocked and asks if it is a demon. The voice continues, saying that the blood flowing in his veins cannot be captured by a mere lesser demon, so he must overcome his fear and ascend to the throne. He passes through the gate, and the voice says that what he desires is here. Upon entering, he says that it has been a long time, and it seems that there is something on the throne. The throne that the Emperor wanted to protect so much that he even made a deal with a demon. He did not know that his companions and he had died because of this, and it seems that he is walking over their corpses just to get here. The voice continues, saying that the child who received the blessing of the cold North Sea, even though his soul was lost, has finally arrived, and on behalf of the Blue Clan, it welcomes him. The sword he used when he was Cain, the sword given to him by the Emperor, is here, a demonic sword called Ruin. The voice tells him to pour mana into it, but Karen protests, saying that it is a demonic sword that devours the soul of its user. The voice tells him that the evil thoughts that dwelled within it were extinguished by his grandfather, and that what he sees is only a distorted form placed there by the demon. The voice tells him to awaken it once more, saying that only he can do it. He wonders if it is normal for him to touch it, saying that he may be returning to his past self due to countless lives spent obeying the Emperor's orders. Then he remembers the words of his grandfather friend, who told him to overcome his fear. Now he understands what that means, saying that he was exceptionally kind. The true purpose of this ceremony is not simply to obtain a weapon, but for the heir of the family who awakened azure clarity to overcome the source of his fear. He grabs the sword, saying that if that is the case, there is only one thing left to do. As soon as he finally grabs the hilt of the sword, he immediately begins to pour mana into it. And when he does so, he is teleported to the depths of the ocean. He asks if this is azure clarity. The sword begins to change shape from a demonic sword back to normal. The voice continues to speak and says that it does not know why the sword met him in this form, but that this sword is the original sword of his ancestor, Rael. The sword that his grandfather took is also the sword of his ancestor. But unlike his grandfather's sword, the reason this sword was not even recorded in historical texts is that the power it possesses is extremely different from that of the family. He begins to be overwhelmed by the feeling of this. The energy flowed through his body. He sees it boiling in his body, and in the end, he cringes from the overflow. A second later, when he comes to his senses, he asks what it is. A voice tells him to be patient, as the mana inside the sword is engraving itself into his body. He says that the mana energy flowing into his body has become more intense, and for a sword to have such an effect is incredible. He asks the voice what the sword's real name is. The voice tells him that it is a sword that must be wielded against demons, devouring their power. A sword that even demons feared, and whose existence had been erased from their memory. A sword born from the deep sea of the north, a place dark but pure. It is a sword of execution, a guillotine. That is the true name of this blade. He looks down at it, and the voice continues, saying that it is a sword reminiscent of the darkness of the deep sea, and that it suits his destiny well. He asks whose voice it is, saying that, judging by the way they call themselves part of the clan, they must be the Blue Dragon, the guardian of their family. The voice says that it does not yet have a name to match their true name, and if he can one day dominate the sea with his power, then let him come and find them in the North Sea. Karen thinks about this and seems annoyed, but then asks how he can get out of there. The voice says he should already know, and he asks if it's really as simple as breaking it. He says he has always wanted to try to break the throne, and begins to pour mana into the sword before bringing it down. Outside, the atmosphere is tense, and Halo sees that Pyle is worried. He tells him not to worry too much. Pyle apologizes. Gallo says it must be painful to watch his son follow a path he never took, and he knows it's not easy, but it's another reason to pull himself together. Pyle smiles at his father's words. Before the Stone of Oath begins to open again, but it doesn't just open, it starts to break. Galo is surprised, turning around, and again that distorting effect begins, pulsing through the forest, and the altar itself begins to break apart. Gallo asks what the hell is going on, and then Karen stands before them, holding the blade, showing that he has indeed returned. But he has no idea where the stone has gone. All the elders present are still trying to digest what has happened. Now the main character looked down at his feet and saw only pieces of broken stone. Everyone around him also continued to stare in shock at what Karen had done. Pale begins to panic, asking what he has done by breaking the stone. Karen also begins to worry, while Galo is surprised because he looks at the weapon, saying that it is a guillotine, and he recognizes it as the blade that belonged to their ancestor Rael. He had been erased from the family history, passed down only orally to the head of the family and the elders. So why has it suddenly appeared now? He asks Karen if he is not afraid of the sword, but wonders if the time of the covenant is approaching. Karen looks at the blade and says he is not afraid. Gallo says he understands and nods, then begins his story about how long ago their ancestors, who were unable to fulfill the covenant with the blue dragon to destroy the demons, left the stone of the oath as proof of the covenant, swearing to the future, and waiting for the day when someone would come along to fulfill it. He wonders if this means that Karen is the one who will inherit it. Gallo raises his hand, announcing that Karen, son of Peel, is a legitimate member of the fortress, a direct descendant chosen by the guillotine, and worthy of inheriting the style of the spiritual sea. Ringo, still angry over the beating of his son, says he can't believe that a brat will be the one to receive it. Pale, however, appears calm, more interested in the blade itself as he comforts Karen. Another member of the family says he thought he knew every weapon passed down to their family, but he had never even heard of this sword, and just looking at it sends shivers down his spine. He says he recognizes that Pale's son is walking a path he could never walk, but he won't let that affect the variables in their question of success. Gallo says that the awakening ceremony is over, and it's time to go back. As they begin to leave, Ringo yells at his brother, in horror and shock, asking if he is going to stand by and watch. His brother tells him that they will have to talk in private soon, and says that even someone overflowing with greed beyond his abilities must feel this crisis. They ask if he knew about the sword, and Guy says he didn't. Ringo says he can't understand the situation, wondering why it's Peel's son, of all people. Brother says that what is important now is that this is not the time to fight among themselves. And finally, he looked at the happy Peel and his son Karen walking ahead of everyone. Returning to the station the next day, Pale asks Karen if he will really be okay staying alone. Henry asks if there is a place safer than their fortress. Pale says that it is true and it is safe from external threats, but what he is worried about is internal threats, meaning his brothers. But with their father there, he doubts they will act rashly. Henry clears his throat, saying that the one entrusted with the role to pass on the style of the spiritual seed of the young lord is none other than Lady Sabina. Pale says he hasn't seen his aunt in a long time, but if it's her, he can rest easy. Karen learns her name, saying that she is Galo's sister, known as a master no less skilled than Galo, and once called the White Wolf. Pale tells him that his aunt has always loved him dearly, so he must make sure not to show her disrespect. Karen says he will do his best, and Heinrich says he has a message from the head of the family. He will prepare a residence for him in the fortress so that he can visit her at any time. Pale looks touched and begins to cry, saying he is so grateful to his father. Thanks to this, he can leave without worry, and he thanks Heinrich. Heinrich tells him not to think about it. Pale tells the main character to take care of himself, and if he ever needs help, to contact him. He heads back to the train home, while Karen heads to the top of the fortress, looking down. Heinrich tells him that it is time to go, as Sabina is waiting. Karen says that is good, because he cannot keep his grandmother waiting. Henry says he wants to give him some advice, if he'll let him. Karen looks at him with a smile and says, of course. And Heinrich says that Sabina hates being called grandmother more than anything, and it is best to refrain from using that term. Karen says he will remember that and thanks him for the advice, but wonders what's wrong with calling his grandmother, grandmother. They enter the fortress, and Heinrich says that only direct descendants of the family can enter this cultivation chamber, and that Sabina is already inside, telling him to come in, and also that Leo is here too. Karen says that being with Leo will probably be fun, and Heinrich says that Leo specifically asked for Sabina. Karen says he's going in, and as he runs off, he watches his energy and joy in silence, saying that it will be lively here again after a long time. Behind the door, the main character senses an aura, and says he can see that things are serious in there. Suddenly, she shouts from behind the door, asking why he is standing outside and not coming in. He enters, greeting her like a white wolf with a respectful gesture, and then as soon as he sees her, he becomes very surprised. She asks if he is surprised that she does not look as expected, and we see that she looks much younger than Halo. She says, just think, he's Peel's son. Time really flies. He wonders if she has reconstructed her body with magic, saying that it is the level of an 8-star knight, but that is impossible. She asks why he is standing there with a blank look on his face, telling him to sit in the lotus position next to Leo. Karen sits down, saying that it seems they will be seeing each other often and they should get along. Leo agrees, and Sabina says she never thought she would hear the title White Wolf from someone as young as him. He says he loves history, so he read about it in a book. She says he is as interesting as her brother said he would be. He asks if the wolf can tell him what her grandfather said about him. She says he is someone she would like, and now that she sees him for herself, she understands why he said that. But there was something else. Her brother told her that he was a child who had to sail the vast ocean, and she needs to help him so that one day he can rule the sea. She must act as a kind of beacon. She says she only saw him for a moment, but she can clearly see that his potential is enormous, unbridled and infinitely vast, like the open sea. Right now, he is just a rough wave, but very soon he will become the patron of all seas. The girl could not even imagine that she would ever meet such a person. It looks like it will be a lot of fun soon. She gets up from her seat, saying that it's time to start, and that the position they are in now is the most basic foundation for mana training. Once they pass the introductory stage, it will be possible to train mana without this pose. She demonstrates this, saying that they will be able to do it even in their sleep. And the two boys' hair immediately flies back. Karen says that it is Azura's mana, and he recognizes it by the Stone of the Oath. She tells him that the technique of sea domination is literally a method of ruling the sea, and using Azura's mana, he creates and controls oceans within his body. Naturally, he becomes stronger by controlling more oceans. When he can control 8 oceans, he will reach the 8-star level. The stage where he can control these 8 oceans as if they were one giant sea is the 9th star. And only 3 people on the entire continent have reached this level, and only 1 person in the empire. Karan says that it is her grandfather, and she says that it is true. Karen is determined to achieve the same thing as Galo in this life. She senses his desire and says that he is an interesting boy, and that it will be fun and interesting to train him. He decides it's time to begin, and she says that first he must allow mana to flow through the passages opened by the ritual, and remember that the power of the sea is not something to be controlled, but something to be accepted. He begins to feel his mana, saying that it is like stormy waves, and he needs to calm it down. He begins to focus it from his heart, and he looks very different from Leo in terms of how much mana he produces. She notices this, asking if it is really the mana of a child who has just completed the awakening ritual. Even Leo, who has been trained in the technique of mastery for the past 2 years, has only just begun to strive for the 2nd star level. Unlike him, Karen is paving his own mana channels on his own, even though she hasn't taught him how yet. Karen says he feels pain, as if his body is being torn apart, and he begins to stop his training. She wonders if he feels the strain, saying that it's good, that he can even control his pace. She looks back and notices that Leo is staggering as if he is on drugs, and the girl runs up to him and says she told him not to force himself to control his mana. He apologizes, and she says she was so focused on Karan that she forgot that even though they have awakened their mana, they are still just children. Therefore, she needs to act like an adult so that they don't harm their bodies. Karen calls him pathetic, and the girl thinks she is impressed that he managed to stop at his limit so as not to overexert his body. At such a young age, having the self-control to control himself, despite the desire to become stronger, shows how smart her older brother was, but she doesn't think she needs to act as his beacon. She approaches him, calling out to him, and says that for 3 years, she will guarantee his safety and he should focus on building up his strength. To protect himself, he says, okay, now it's time for practical training. So they head to where everyone else. Fantasy Saitama is also training. The instructor turns around when he sees Leo and Karen entering. Leo asks if he really plans to use that sword for training. Karen replies that of course he is, since everyone kept saying that his aura was threatening, so he's not even allowed to take it out of its sheath. Leo says that's not what he means. The instructor greets them both. Karen looks up at him, and the man introduces himself, saying that today he will be in charge of his sword training, that he is the commander of the Sea Wolf Knights. His name is Zera Winterguard, but he can be called simply Sir Zera. Karen says he is pleased to meet him, and that he can see at first glance that he is at the 8-star level. Zera says that it may seem rude, but he will not address them as young master or anything similar until they have earned recognition. Karen tells him not to worry about it, as it is more convenient for him, since he is not used to the title anyway. He knows very well that it is a tradition of the Reston family to earn the respect of the Blue Wolves through their skills. Zera says that this is quite an interesting reaction, as most would consider it disrespectful. Leo is no exception, and Leo is simply baffled as to why he got dragged into this. Karen stares at him and laughs, saying that it won't matter because they will all bow down at his feet. Zera says that perhaps an heir with a good head on his shoulders has finally arrived, then wonders if someone worse has arrived, and that he will definitely be worse than Leo ever was. 3 whole years pass, and Halo drinks, but Sabina drinks too. She says that, as expected, her brother's booze is definitely better, and Halo says it's time for her to stop carrying his collection around. She asks him to stop saying such disappointing things because she spent 3 whole years training. He says that those 3 years really did fly by, and asks what her impressions of the boy are after observing him. She says she only had one thought, and that thought was that the boy is simply a monster. Halo says that she has the audacity to call his grandson a monster, and she replies that even the word genius would be an insult to him. Halo asks Zero if he feels the same way. He says that if he may express his opinion, especially after observing him for the past 3 years, he agrees with Sabina in all aspects: his physical abilities, talent, attitude, willingness to train, as well as the fact that he feels superior to the first great heir, who was considered a genius. Halo asks if he is really comparable to Hugo, saying that talent greater than his would be madness, since Hugo is considered the best in the Empire. Zero says that is exactly what he thinks. Sabina says that this will create problems for the family if the situation is not handled properly, and Halo asks what she means. She says he needs to think about the impact Karen will have on the line of succession and what it will mean for his sons. He asks if she is implying that his uncles could become a threat to his own nephew. She says that he may have everything under strict control now, but if his outstanding talent becomes known throughout the empire, it will affect who becomes his successor and what happens next. Halo realizes she is right. She sighs, saying that now that the Oathstone has been destroyed, their family may come to an end. As the number of magical beasts crossing the North Sea has increased dramatically, he tells her to stop talking nonsense. Whoever broke it will erect a new one, just as their founding ancestor erected the stone long ago. She says this is the first she has heard of it, asking if it is a prophecy passed down only to the head of the family. He replies, yes, it means that the time of the covenant is near. She says that it seems that the burden on the shoulders of their dear youngest will become very heavy, and asks when he plans to tell Karen. Halo says he will do so when the time is right. At this time, Karen was writing a letter to his father, asking if he was well. He writes that he must first apologize for not being able to visit, as he is absorbed in training. The weather is getting colder, and since his father is sensitive to the cold, he should dress warmer. He says that he recently mastered the fourth stance of the J style and the fourth form of harang fencing. As instructed, he is doing his best to get along with his relatives and taking good care of Leo. He tells his father that he has a request, informing him that he has run out of pocket money and asking him to send some. His father laughs, asking Heinrich if he remembers how worried he was when he first left him at the fortress 3 years ago. But it's amazing to think that he has adapted so well. Heinrich says that these days the fortress is never quiet, thanks to the young Grand Heir. Pale says he has told him many times that standing out is not a good thing, and Heinrich replies that a gem shines even when it is still. He agrees that this is true, and Heinrich says that the situation may change from this point on, and it may become impossible to prevent information about him from spreading outside the fortress. Pale asks if he is trying to say that he may soon be sent on a mission. Heinrich replies that this is true, and he must complete the task given to him by the Blue Wolves. Pale says he knows, but he is concerned that his older brothers will not be happy about his son's growing influence. Heinrich says he can only say one thing: Sabina loves Karen very much. Pale realizes that with his aunt there, it will be difficult for them to do anything, and says that Karen has been writing to him in letters for the last 3 years about how much she cares for him, but he feels more at ease hearing it from Heinrich. Heinrich says that Sabina has always loved Pale too. He says that it seems that the pocket money he sent every month has paid off, and Heinrich laughs, saying that since he is able to joke, his worries are receding. Pale says that his aunt, however, must also leave the fortress soon. Heinrich says that, in his opinion, he should not worry about this either, because Karan has formed strong bonds with the knights of the fortress. This is disrespectful treatment, but it has reached the point where the knights themselves have given him a nickname. Pale laughs, saying he has heard of this nickname, and that he is called the young mad dog of the Azure Sea Fortress. We see one of the knights fighting, and it is none other than Karen who breaks his own blade. The guy tells him to stop, as he has already lost, asking how he could have simply changed the trajectory of his sword and taken the blow. We learn that the second one is called Hans. Karen says he should know that the harang sword is useless if it is suppressed by force, so he judges strength by strength, and a grown man like him cannot be so weak. Hans says that he is probably the only one who would criticize his strength, and Karan replies that his muscles are just for show. Hans says that this is the first time anyone has said that to him, and Karan replies that he is just being honest. Hans then says that he now feels uncomfortable fighting him without using magic, and that last year things weren't so bad. It seems that he may soon be sent on a mission. Karen asks if he has heard anything. He says that only Zirath, not the head of the family, will decide when to send him on a mission, since the head of the family is in the capital, and that he may be sent to the Granari region in the western part of the duchy, as magical beasts have been appearing there more frequently. Karen immediately shouted to Leo, asking if he had heard them talking about sending him on a mission. Gorshak says he doesn't want to be sent on the same mission as Karen, and the man he is fighting tells him to focus on the fight. Leo apologizes, saying that a mission is a mission, and if he completes it, perhaps his mother and father will be pleased. Let's go back to Pale. He tells Henry that he asked him to come in person because of the letter. Henry asks what the matter is, and Pyle asks him to take a look at it. The thieves' inspectors found it in a merchant's wagon arriving from the barony of Bellis. He dips his fingers into it, asking if it is what he thinks it is. Pale confirms that it is a drug called cocaine, and he needs him to investigate the affairs of the barony of Bellis from here, from the fortress. Heinrich brings it to his nose, catching flashbacks from the days when his life was full of rock and roll and all sorts of nonsense. The scene changes. We see a train arriving, and a man slowly emerges from it, asking if this is the fortress of the Azure Sea. Somewhere in the castle that same night, we see guards patrolling, and Karen looks like he's trying to sneak away. He says that rummaging through Zara's collection is always exciting, and just because he's in a child's body doesn't mean he's forgotten the taste of booze. Then he notices two people and asks who one of them is, as he has never seen them before. The guy asks one of the butlers if it's true that the Duke is away, as it's urgent. The butler replies that he has gone to the capital for an audience with His Majesty and is currently being replaced by the commander of the knights. Karen calls out to them, and the butler is surprised to see him. Karen asks what brings him there so late at night, and the man says that he is Baron Rohan of the House of Bellis and has an urgent request. Karen looks at him intently, and Rohan thinks that if he is the young duke, that makes him the son of the third prince, who was removed from the line of succession. He has heard that, unlike his father, he awakened magic while training at the main house. He tells him that it is an honor to meet him, and introduces himself, but Karen says he will listen to him. The butler says it would be better to send him to the commander of the knights, but Rohan is simply puzzled as to why he is holding a bottle of alcohol. Karen says that they usually send trusted messengers, but if he came in person, it must be urgent, and it is only fitting that a nobleman receive him. The butler says he will go and inform Zara separately, and Karen says fine. Rohan just hopes he's not a troublemaker, thinking his political judgment is impressive, but that bottle of booze still bothers him. Rohan asks if the Reston family is always like this, drinking at such a young age. The scene switches abruptly, and now it's time to wrap things up. Karen asks if the problem is with the gang that has settled in the eastern mountains of the barony. Rohan says that's right, and Karen says that since the bandits appeared, drugs have suddenly begun to circulate, and commoners are being kidnapped and sold as slaves. Rohan says yes, it's shameful, but their barony has poor, barren land and no special goods. For a whole year, they didn't even have a proper army, so they couldn't fight back. Unable to bear it, his father led the few troops they had to attack the bandits, but instead they suffered heavy losses, and his father is bedridden because of the battle. Because of his incompetence, both his father and the people are suffering. Karen puts down the bottle of liquor, saying that bastards like these deserve to be torn to pieces and killed, but there are things that don't make sense. Even if his military power is weak, it is strange that bandits can stand up to a regular army. Rohan says that this has not been confirmed, but they suspect that they have deserters from the southern kingdom, which is at war. Karen ponders this, saying that he has heard that since the overthrow of the evil emperor, the imperial army, which has been reduced in size, has been concentrated in the south due to the war. Since there are no reserves left for the north, it is natural that there are gaps in public order, and the theory that the deserters have become bandits does seem plausible. He then says that the mood is not light and, laughing, asks if he wants a drink. Karen says that he may not know this, but the barony of Bellis borders the territory where his father lives, and from his position, he cannot turn a blind eye to this. If possible, he would like to help personally. Rohan thanks him but wonders if it is really okay to drink alcohol offered by a child. Karen says that the alcohol was stolen from Zara's collection, so it must remain a secret. Rohan says that Cirrus is actually a knight commander, and Zirus enters, saying that they both agree. He will stop touching his drinks. Rohan shudders and apologizes, saying he was rude. Zarath says the young baron couldn't have known, so he shouldn't worry about it. He has heard about bandits troubling his barony. Rohan says that this is true, and that is why he has come to the fortress, to find out if the knights could come. Zerus agrees, saying that it is urgent, but Karen just laughs. Zerus tells him that alcohol is bad for someone his age and snatches the cup away. Karen asks for his drink back, and Zarath says he is sorry that he saw such an unsightly scene. Rohan tells him that everything is fine, and Zerus says that since he has come to them, they will not sit idly by in the face of their old comrades' difficulties. Rohan says that this is good news, and Zereth says they will soon organize troops to send, so he need not worry. Rohan says he is relieved that he can bring good news to his people. Karen says he would like to go with them. Zareth says that won't work, as the enemy is trained, and who knows what experts might be among them. Rohan asks if this child really wanted to help, because he may be training in the main house, but he looks no older than 12 or 13. Zareth says that in just 3 years, he has raised his magic to the level of a 4th star and advanced to the 4th form of their fencing. But real battle is different. Karen says that overprotection is not good, and he would prefer to be sent west because visible danger is better than invisible danger. Zareth says he has no intention of letting him risk fighting enemies whose numbers, strength, and base are unknown. Then Karen says he will make him an offer he cannot refuse. Rohan and Zarath wonder what it is he wants to do. The scene switches. Leo asks why he is here, and Karen says it's exciting because it's their first mission. Zareth says that he has been led astray, completely deceived. To think that he would bring Sabina. She says that the two of them are so cute. Zareth says that it might be for the best, as it means they will be accompanied by a reliable guard. She says that she was also nervous about her first mission. Zareth says that since he agreed on the condition that Leo would go with him, it must mean that she is satisfied with their training. Rohan says that the presence of the legendary White Wolf here is madness, and he wonders if everything will really be okay with just 2 young people, and if something happens to the Duke's grandson, his house could be held responsible. Zareth tells him not to worry, because what the young people fear will not come true. Rohan asks if it was that obvious, and Zarath says that with Sabina around, nothing will happen to the two of them. Sabina then says that as long as the 2 children are not in mortal danger, she does not plan to intervene. Both Leo and Rohan look as if this is terrible news, and Zareth says he knows she believes in their growth. But still, this is too much. She says he knows it's not just that. There's a reason she shouldn't go to the front lines. He says he understands, and if that is her true will, he will accept it. The train signals its departure, and she says it's time. Leo begins to weaken because the new adventure is getting closer, and Sabina says it's natural for him to be nervous, but he should think of it as a chance to prove how hard he has worked over the last 3 years. It's a chance to be recognized as a member of the Blue Wolves. He says she's right, and Karen asks if he always needs someone to push him from behind. Leo tells him to shut up, and they jump on the train. Karen says he needs to find their place. Leo says he knew this would happen, that the time would come when he would have to prove himself. The magic train, now traveling through Belize, departs, and Leo says he never thought it would come so soon. It turns out that her very presence in the fortress is classified information, which means that the White Wolf cannot appear in public. The moment her presence becomes known, the bandits will disappear without a trace, and of course, Rohan wouldn't want that either. He says he wouldn't want that, but wonders if it's really okay to trust only these 2 kids with this, since one of them doesn't even seem to know the meaning of the word nervous, and he thought this was his first mission. The other one just worries him so much because Leo is so deeply immersed in his thoughts right now. Leo is just thinking about his mother, remembering how she asked if he could think at all, asking how he could get along with that boy Karen, asking if he had forgotten what happened 3 years ago, that he should remember well, that he is not his friend but his rival, that he was disgraced by him and tarnished his father's reputation, but still he laughs and jokes with him as if nothing had happened. He must not have a brain in his head, and if he has a tongue, he must say something. He must be a man. Leo says he's sorry, but they're not rivals. Even his brother Hugo, the so-called genius, didn't reach 3 stars until he was 14. Karen achieved this at 13, and in comparison, he only managed to achieve 3 stars this year at 15. Surely she herself sees the difference, and that Karen can be his benchmark, but he can never be his rival. She says he should let go of his inferiority complex. Then he says that's not the point. Karen's existence is a driving force that pushes him to work harder and move forward on his own. She says that his eyes show that he is truly blind, that he sees the trees but not the forest. That's the assessment from his own mother. Sabina calls out to him, pulling him out of his thoughts. She asks if it's so hard for him to shake off his nervousness. Leo says yes, and she says it's understandable, since it's his first mission, asking if he can bring himself to kill someone. Karen is the kind of boy who would sell him out if it meant saving his own skin, but she knows Leo isn't like that. And he no longer needs to doubt himself. She knows better than anyone how hard he has worked these past 3 years, and after all, she was the one who trained him. The girl smiled. He says she's right to call her master, and she says that sounds fine. They have 20 minutes before they arrive at the territory. Sabina says that for this mission, they should address each other as master and apprentice. He agrees and Rohan asks where she is going. She says that if she shows up at the station, rumors will spread instantly, so she needs to go first. He says the train is still moving. He continues to call her a white wolf, so she corrects him, telling him to just call her Lady Sabina. Karen says she is as bold as ever, and she says that her grandnephews will be watching nearby, so he doesn't need to worry. She jumps out the window, he yells after her, and Karen just sits there and laughs. Rohan and Leo both wonder what the hell is wrong with the Reston family, and the train continued to roll forward through the snow-covered mountains. The scene changes. We see an old man coughing, and it's Rohan's father, saying that his body is not in the best shape, so he hopes they will forgive him for taking Reston's young wolves sitting down. Karen says he shouldn't mention it, asking how his wounds are. He says that the danger has passed, so he appreciates their concern, and he doesn't know if Karen remembers, but he once met him and his father 10 years ago. He says he has grown up magnificently. Karen says he can speak freely, as he is not strong in etiquette, and it only causes him discomfort. Rohan asks if it's okay to call him by his first name, even if it makes him uncomfortable. Karen says that's fine. Baron says that if he is already on his first mission, then he has achieved 4 stars at such a young age. Karen says that this is true, but Leo is only a 3-star, and Leo wonders why he has been brought along again. Karen is surprised that even though Baron is not a warrior, he still knows quite a lot. Baron says that even though he is not a warrior, the fact that he was sent means that he is held in very high regard. And because of this, he hesitates to entrust such a dangerous task to promising young men. Karen says he understands his concerns, but if they fail in their mission, it will disgrace the proud honor of the Blue Wolves, and they have no intention of losing. He asks Leo if he agrees, saying that they will see the task through to the end without failure. The Baron laughs, thanks them, then starts coughing. Rohan asks if he is okay, and Karen says that he seems to need rest, so they should leave. He says he will leave it to them, the guide is ready, so just follow him. Karen says, okay. And as they are leaving, Leo calls out to him. Karen asks if he's tired already, and Leo says that's not what he means, but wants to know if they can trust this herbalist. Even if he's an experienced local guide, there's no guarantee he's not in cahoots with the bandits. Karen asks if he has finally started using his brain, saying that he is definitely part of the gang. Leo asks how he knows, and Karen replies that it's because of a conversation he had with Rohan when they first arrived at the station. At that time, he asked him how they planned to track down the bandits' hideout. And Rohan said that unfortunately he had no choice but to use a traitor from within their territory. Karen thought it was a good method and tells Leo that's the gist of it. Leo asks why he didn't tell him earlier, and Karen says it's because he had been on edge all day. Leo says, still, to think that he would consciously stay with a traitor, he really is cunning. Karen says that the fact that he wasn't punished all this time shows a lot, but it also shows how desperate they are, which is why they are now bait. The sons of nobles traveling through the barony to neighboring estates are the perfect setup. There will be a hefty ransom. It looks like they're about to take the bait. As the herbalist turns around, followed by the bandits, saying that it's fine, and that he added a little more than promise since they are nobles. The bald guy says that these young gentlemen don't look like the type who will go quietly and without a fight. Karen instantly draws his blade, while Leo trembles behind him, and says that parasites like them should not dare to distribute drugs on his father's territory. In the barony of Bellis, the Baron is still coughing. Rohan asks his father if he is all right, and he replies that he is. Rohan approaches, handing him water, and the Baron thanks him. Rohan just looks concerned, asking if he thinks the 2 young dukes will be okay. His father says that sending the 2 boys to their estates without any proper information about the bandits should be taken as a sign of how confident they are in the boys' abilities. Furthermore, this boy named Karen reminds him of the young duke, not only in appearance, but also in his confident manner and relaxed attitude. He believes it would be right to place his hopes in the 2 boys. Rohan listened to all this and finally agreed with his vinegar. The scene changed, once again in the forest. We see blood spilled everywhere on the ground. Karen beheaded some bandits in an instant, showing how skilled and cool he is. Leo can't help but watch as Karen single-handedly takes care of them all. Looking at the herbalist crying in his final moments, Leo says that he is a monster. And that's the only way to describe what he sees in the 13-year-old boy. Even the gangsters are terrified. One of them tells the leader, that he doesn't think they're ordinary, and that they should retreat and report to the main forces. But the guy is furious and rushes into the attack, saying that he won't be defeated by some brat. He says he'll show him what he's made of. Jumping into the air and releasing his aura, Karen calmly and smoothly swings his sword forward, saying that he's damn loud and it's pissing him off. We see the leader get cut right down the middle, and he falls to his knees right in front of his assistant and the protagonist's stunned partner. Leo says that he drew his sword without even realizing it, and Karan begins to wipe the blood from his sword, saying that his clothes are dirty too. Leo sheathes his sword, saying that Karen is one thing, but the aura of the sword emanating from its blade seemed overwhelming, as if it could slit his throat at any moment. The bandits surrender, one of them shouting it over and over again. Karen asks his name, and he replies that his name is Ura. Karen asks if Ura has a rope, and he says he does. Karen orders him to bring her, and Leo wonders what he is doing. After a while, we see a man with his hands tied, and he's not a gangster. We see Karen and Leo with their hands tied, and Leo asks if they really need to go this far. He says he understands why they tied him up, but does this guy really have to carry their weapons? Karen says he told them to act as bait and find their base, so they have to be convincing. How would it look if they were walking around with weapons? So it makes sense that they were captured and taken away. Otherwise, there would be no point in a guy like this taking them. And he wants to get some information along the way. He yells at Ure, asking if they are deserters. He confirms this and says they were from the 9th Regiment, 1st Battalion, 3rd Infantry Division of the Kingdom of Maria. Leo says that means they're from the south where the war is, and Karen asks how big their group is. Ura says that, including the mage and his 2 escort knights, there are 130 of them in total. Karen says that a mage is surprising, and 130 deserters is a lot. Ura says that's right, and he realizes he picked the wrong guys. He thought they were just ordinary nobles, but the blue aura from Karen's eyes earlier means that they must be the children of the House of Reston, the heart of the Orish Empire. Karen and Leo are still thinking about the mage, saying that even for deserters, why did they come to this remote northern region? Ura says it's simple. Their commander promised them enough money to live a life of leisure, so they all followed him. Karen says that for a simple infantry commander to be accompanied by a high-level mage, and to have a bunch of guys acting like bandits just for money in a poor barony, it doesn't make sense. Ura gasped and told the gentleman that they would arrive soon. And Karen says he'll know for sure once he sees it with his own eyes. In their fortress, several men at the top of the watchtower saw the heroes and asked if Ura had really brought the hostages, asking where the others are, why he is alone, and why he is carrying their weapons. Ura says that he took them from these brats, and they are his spoils, so they should not touch them. The rest of his comrades chase after the guards of these brats, so they should hurry up and open the gate. One of the guys asks why he is so nervous, wondering if he's excited that the boss is going to praise him for the first time. Another asks if he could have brought them earlier. Ura tells him to shut up while the supposed hostages follow him through the gangster's base. And Karen says that for a guy who joined a gang of thieves, he's very soft-hearted, and that he has felt this strange power ever since. Ura, sweating nervously, looks at Karen's blade, saying that he has had a terrible feeling for some time. Karen says that if his blade is reacting too, it could be something bigger than he thought. Leo tells him to look, and they see birds nailed to the ground, crucified. Karen says that since a sacrifice was hung, it is definitely nothing less than black magic. They stand in front of a magic circle. Karen orders Ura to cut the ropes and give him the sword. He obeys, and Karen tells Leo to bear his blade, as he will need it very soon. Leo asks what he means, and then skeletons begin to rise from the ground. Ure shouts, and Leo is surprised to see that the pile of shit and sticks are turning into warriors, until a whole squad of dead soldiers forms in front of them. One man shouts that the hostages have come of their own accord, and that this is a blessing. We see the leader of the group greeting them along with a bunch of archers, calling them precious, noble brats. The archers did not look away or slacken their bows. Karen notices that the black mage is nowhere to be seen and suggests that he is probably hiding somewhere and casting spells because they are such creepy types. Karen says that if they attack, he will slit Ura's throat and asks if that is acceptable to them. Ura is frightened, and Leo asks how it happened that they are now holding a hostage, even though they are supposed to possess noble honor. The leader looks at him for a second while his men remain on guard, and the dead continue to crawl out of the ground, and asks how a nobleman can take a hostage, since they should value honor above all else. Karen asks why they can't do the same if that's what they do, and Yura is simply horrified. The leader says he is funny, but he is wrong. A hostage without value means nothing. And this one is completely useless, so he can do whatever he wants with him. Karen gets annoyed, calling Yura worthless. Yura says that it's probably his fault, and Leo says that there are more enemies and asks Karen if he has a plan at all. Karen replies that of course he does. The bows are still aimed at their heads. The main character immediately turned around and said that all they needed to do is to take out the commander. He begins to release his aura. The commander recognizes its color and says that this cannot be. Karen tells Leo that he will leave the skeletons to him, and Leo asks what he means. Karen begins to release Azure Mana, saying that he will deal with the commander himself, as if ocean waves are supporting him, surrounding the entire scene. The mana itself envelops him, and he pushes off from the ground. Leo yells as one of the skeletons attacks, but the guy manages to block the blow and asks what the hell Karen is thinking, and how he is supposed to deal with so many skeletons on his own. The leader yells at his men to shoot as Karen approaches, but Karen says he's too late. Using a fortress sword style, he lunges forward, cutting off the arms of several archers with movements resembling ocean waves. The commander yells, reaching for his blade, but Karen, full of deadly energy, says that this guy is just a hindrance, and strikes him. The commander looks in shock at his severed arm, then falls to his knees and screams in pain, and GG lands nearby. Karen says that if he was going to attack, he should have done it faster. The commander calls him a bastard, saying that their fortress surely doesn't have extra forces for their territories. So why is he here? Karen replies that this barony is right next to his father's domain, and he won't kill him, but simply drag him back to the fortress. While Leo continues to tear the soldiers apart, Karen notes that he is doing quite well. The archers are still aiming, but not shooting. Karen says that Leo's actions are suitable for the sea wave style, but he should crush them with brute force. The commander asks if he really thinks he will get out of there alive, and Karen asks his name. He replies that his name is Michael Knox. Karen says he's not going to kill him, then stabs Michael in the knee with his sword, causing him to scream in unbearable pain. The archers are too scared to do anything. Karen laughs, ordering him to tell his men to drop their weapons. Michael shouts the order, and they begin to obey, throwing down their bows. Karen pulls out his sword and tells him that he is obedient and that he likes it. Michael says he can't believe they lost to a couple of brats, but as soon as the rest arrive, even he won't be able to handle it, even if he's from the House of Reston. Karen says that it seems like he's still hopeful, and asks if he is counting on the black magicians and thinks that his family would send only 2 children. Leo finishes with the skeletons, noting that the magic circle with the skeletons has finally disappeared. And then there is an explosion. Karen says that of course they have a guard, and thanks to the time he wasted, it seems his mentor caught the black mage, and we see her carrying his head, looking very angry. What a woman. Leo calls out to her, and she yells at both of them, saying that they missed the most important clue, and that the mission has failed. Karen angrily pushes Michael off the top of the stairs, and follows him down, saying that she probably liked the method. She says that throwing himself straight into the jaws of the enemy is what her brother would have done, and for that she will give him credit, as it suits their house. She throws the black mage's head forward, saying that he will be stripped of his glasses for staging a sudden hostage-taking. Michael looks at his friend's head, and Sabina asks why he staged the hostage situation in the first place. Karen says they wanted to strike where it was least expected, as no one could imagine that the nobles would take hostages. She agrees, saying she has never seen anyone like him, that he is crazy. He thanks her. Michael just wonders if they are nobles at all. She says they should return to Lord Bellis' castle, as she has many questions for him. He agrees. Michael looks at his friend's head again, calling them madmen in this damn Reston family. The scene abruptly changes to the prison. Some of the Baron's soldiers find the place where the prisoners are being held. A man runs in, asking about his daughter Isabel. She falls into his arms, and he begins to apologize for not being able to protect her. We see Karen and Yura watching this. She was so scared, and Yura watches the reunion. Karen asks him if he feels guilty now. He replies that he does. Karen says it's too early for that, as being thrown into the Baron's dungeon like his comrades might have been the best outcome. Ura asks why, and Caron says he will go to the fortress with his boss Michael, who is still lying on the ground with his arm cut off. Ura asks why me, and even Sabina asks if it's okay not to tie up the ball guy. Karen looks at Ura, saying that for now they need someone to help transport Michael to the fortress, as he is too injured to walk on his own. She thinks about it while Karen tells Ura not to let his guard down. He agrees. Some of the people ask if Uru will also be punished. Karen says yes, since technically he is also a bandit. One of the men says that maybe it's presumptuous to speak up, but Ura genuinely cared for the prisoners while they were there. He even secretly brought medicine to the sick and gave food to those who were starving, so they should show him mercy. Sabina asks Karen what he thinks, and Karen says that they should at least consider leniency, since he helped bring them to safety. Ura is thrilled, saying he will serve him faithfully for the rest of his life. Karen reminds him that they already told him not to slack off. Leo calls him over, saying he needs to come and check something. Karen looks puzzled and asks what's there, and Leo calls him again and tells him to see for himself. The barrel is open, and a strange blue glow is coming from it. Karen asks if it is what he thinks it is. Inside lies a magic stone, a mana stone. The scene changes abruptly. Many people in the barony are happy to see the bandits being taken away. Leo says that Karen should know that Rohan will probably throw a banquet in honor of this. Leo begins waving to the citizens, but Karen remains silent. He asks if Karen is ignoring him. Karen thought that this was to be expected. There was a reason why such a large group was hiding in the remote mountains of this barony. But the Baron's family probably didn't even know there was a magic stone mine on their land. He doesn't know the quality yet, but the very existence of the mine could bring huge profits. Leo just watched and wondered what the hell he was up to now, while Sabina said that Rohan had come to greet him. Rohan greets them all, while the others take the prisoners to the dungeons. Sabina says she will take the bandit leader, asking if he minds. Rohan says of course, but would like to ask for something. She says she is only here as a guard, so he should talk to her students. He says that since they have prepared a modest banquet, he would like to eat and talk. Karen apologizes but says they need to leave for the fortress immediately, even though Leo looks like he really wants to eat. Rohan asks if this is really the case, saying that it is a matter of payment for the assignment. Their territory does not have the funds to pay the fortress, so he would like to ask for a delay. Karen starts to look greedy, and Leo says he can't believe he has that look again. Karen says he was wondering why the bandits decided to settle in this particular barony, and he understands now. Rohan asks what he means, and Karan suggests he think about it. The barony of Bellis is remote, with no local delicacies. It's literally just a hole. Rohan barely contains his disappointment, and Karan says that, of course, the only thing they were hunting for was something else. He takes out a magic stone, and Rohan looks surprised. Karen says it's on their territory, asking if he knew. He replies no. He had no idea there was a mine somewhere nearby. Karen says that in that case, he would like to make a proposal. Rohan asks what it is, and Karen says he wants to jointly develop the mine with the fortress. Provided that the fortress provides the initial capital and security, Rohan asks if this brat understands what he is saying, because even if you disregard the development, the costs of storage and security alone are astronomical, but the participation of someone from the Reston family could be of enormous benefit to them. He calculates that it is worth it, but asks who gave this child the idea that he could negotiate something so big on his own. Karen says he will have to report on this, but if the project is approved, the Knights of the Fortress could be stationed here, boosting their economy and solving their defense problems in one fell swoop. Rohan asks what share of the mine the Duke's house would want. Karen says he will discuss this with his father, as a child like him is not qualified to deal with such delicate matters. Rohan says he will also discuss it with his aides, and Karen says they will be in touch. Sabina just looks proud of him. On the way back, Karen says he has a question for her. He asks why she said things that could complicate everything in the bandits' hideout. She says it's because of the black magician whose head was in her bag. Karen asks if it's because he was unusual. She says his name was Ted Delarda, a second-class criminal in the Empire, a sixth-circle dark mage. This takes Karen by surprise. She says he was a second-class fugitive, rampaging through imperial territories alongside deserters from the Southern Kingdom. While Karen and Leo were too busy dealing with petty thugs to notice anything important, she says that people only become stronger by fighting strong opponents, and if he had defeated the Black Mage first, he would not have wasted time. That's why she considers it a failure, and he should remember that. Leo wonders why he feels like he's in the way. Sabina addresses him, saying that he actually did better than she expected. And since it must have been his first time against undead, he should be proud. He begins to look happy that he has not been forgotten. And she tells him that he needs more self-confidence to continue performing feats. Upon returning to the Azure Sea Fortress, Heinrich says that the Lord has finally returned and greets him. Halo asks if anything unusual happened. He says that the knights sent west have returned and that Karen and Leo have returned from their mission accompanied by Sabina. Suddenly, one of the butlers runs up shouting. Halo asks what is the matter. The butler hands him a scroll and says it is a letter from the Imperial Palace. Halo wonders what it could be, as the Emperor said nothing before he left the capital. He reads it and is very surprised. As the train is heading to their city, it turns out that the Emperor himself is inviting Karen to the capital. When Karen is about to arrive back in the duchy, and finally the train arrives at the fortress, Ura comes out first carrying Michael. Ura asks if this is the fortress. It's huge. And Michael says that he surely doesn't believe what that brat said. Soon he will be thrown into prison too. Now he must listen carefully. If they want to survive, they must seize the moment when the guards are distracted. Ura punches him in the face, telling him to shut up. Leo and Karen just watch. Ura reminds him that he called him useless and said he should just be killed. Finally, Pale approaches them and says that everything around him is as noisy as ever, and Karen turns around, happy to see his father. Pale asks Sabina if she is well, and she says more or less, and it seems that he has also been summoned. He says it seems to be because of what he did on Baron Bellis's estate, and it's quite a headache. He says that the Baron seems pleased, however, and Leo bows, asking how he is doing. Pale says he heard about his exploits on the Baron's lands, and that the rumors even reached him, and his older brother must have heard them too, so he's sure to be delighted. Leo thanks him. Pale says that they must all be tired, so they should go upstairs. As they start to leave, Sabina tells Pale that the situation in the Empire seems unstable, asking if he knows anything, and he says that the so-called powerful families, apart from their own, are quickly rallying around Duke Salmon and Marquis Diaz. He says that Halo planned to meet with several families in the capital to understand the situation, but it seems he canceled everything after negotiations with the Emperor failed to produce satisfactory results. Both Duke Salmon and Marquis Diaz overthrew the old Emperor and put the current one on the throne, and now they hold real power in the kingdom. And the reason her brother decided to step down from central power after the fall of the Empire was because he thought it was best for the future of the Empire, yet the way they are being treated now is simply ridiculous. She says that it seems the era of peace is coming to an end, and Pale agrees, saying that whether they like it or not, it seems it is time for their family to move on. She says that perhaps what his son has done will benefit them the most, because under a reasonable pretext, they can now station troops on their family's lands and expand their influence, and that his son is certainly interesting for pulling off something so beneficial to the family at the perfect moment. Pale is embarrassed, saying that flattery is certainly nice, and she reminds him that she was not praising him. The scene changes, Karen and the others return, and Zarath says it was good work, and he heard what happened about the group of deserters. Karen says that the one being carried is their leader, and Zareth says he will interrogate him while he is still breathing, extracting every bit of information he can. Hans then asks who the bald man carrying the bandit is, and Karen says that he is also a bandit and they should take him with them. Ura starts to get scared, and Karan tells him that he is an informant, so they will treat him gently and release him later, as he intends to use him as an assistant. He then says he is going to go inside and rest, but Xeris says he cannot, as his mission is not yet complete. He has to write a report, as it is necessary for the mission to be re-evaluated and future performance to be improved. Karen asks if they need to write separately, and he says they can just do it together. Karen says that's fine, since he did all the work and Leo can take care of the report. Leo says it would be faster if they worked together, but Karen tells him to think carefully. Once the report is submitted, his father will read it too, which means they should emphasize Leo's achievements in the report, so this is his chance to earn his father's favor. Leo says that sounds right, but if his name appears too often, it will have the opposite effect. Xeris gets annoyed and orders Hans to take the prisoners away. Sabina then throws the dark mage Xeris' head and asks him not to play football with her. She then says that as for her report, the boys can submit it under their own names. She and Karen leave, leaving Leo to do all the work. Leo asks where he is going, and he says he needs to go to the training hall, as he has reached the 4th star and can use it on his own. Xerus says that if he heads straight to the training hall the moment he returns from his first mission, how can anyone look at him and believe that he is only a 13-year-old boy? Back to the meeting, Halo says he called them all together late at night for a very important reason. It has to do with information that was recently obtained due to the monster hunt near the Azure Sea Fortress. Then he suddenly cried out and called for Heinrich, asking him to summon the captain of the knights. Xerus says that he is already here and has brought the item that was requested. And Halo says it is a piece of skin taken from a monster that appeared in the western plains of Faramint. At first glance, it looks normal, but the dark energy inside it is no ordinary force. It is the black ether of the evil emperor. All of his sons look surprised, and Pale says that the evil emperor has been dead for a long time, and that black ether dwells in monsters. But Halo interrupts them, saying that there are only 2 possibilities. Either it is the remnants of the emperor's lingering will, or the evil emperor is still alive. In any case, his conclusion is that this cannot be unrelated to the events in the empire. Moreover, rumors of what happened in the lands of Belus seem to have reached His Majesty's ears, and the emperor has summoned Karen to the capital. Ringo does not seem happy about this, and Pale is simply surprised. Halo says he can't send him there alone, and he will send Leo and some knights as well. Of course, he will ask for his opinion first, and if he refuses, he will not force him to go. Pale asks if this will cause any problems, and Halo says that it's fine because he's still just a child. But more importantly, he needs to hear why he made such a deal with Belis's son, and that he needs to bring Karan here right now, while we watch him train his mana. As he continues his training, he doesn't get distracted, and without turning around asks Xerath when he arrived. Xerus thinks for a moment and says that it was recently, and Karan says he heard that the only one besides his immediate family who is allowed to enter is him, but he doesn't remember him ever entering the laboratory, asking if something urgent has happened. Xerus nodded silently with a smile, saying that he would probably have to go to the capital soon. This information catches the main character a little off guard. Xerus tells him that the head of the family has summoned him to a family council, so he will hear the details from him. Just before they enter the room, the butler opened the door and announced to everyone that Sir Karen had arrived. Halo immediately asks if he enjoyed his first mission. Karen replies yes, and Halo says that the reason he called him here is because of what happened in the barony of Belus, and that he had no right to represent their house in business matters. So why did he act independently with them? Karen wonders if this is more for scolding or praise, and Halo asks if it ever occurred to him that his arrogant behavior was a serious discourtesy to the Belly's family. Sharon says no, he only made a one-time deal with Belus, and the Baron's son accepted his offer of his own free will. Moreover, he reasoned that there was something far more important than the formal etiquette of the nobility. Halo asks what could be more important to a nobleman than politeness. Karen thinks about the right answer and says it was family honor. All of its members immediately turn to the boy. Halo seems to think this is a good answer, saying that given the value of the deal, he could have boasted about his own achievement, but instead he put the family's interests above his own and stepped aside. Halo says that this is excellent tact, and the joy of not being expelled from the family but simply recognized as successful is the icing on the cake. His uncles are watching him closely, and Karen says they are watching very warily, but Halo speaks very well. Ultimately, the deal he brought will greatly benefit the house, and Pale can take care of the negotiations. Since there is nothing wrong with a father basking in the glory of his son's achievements, Pale says he will leave for the barony at dawn. Then Halo says, next, regarding the letter from the Emperor, His Majesty summoned him, as rumors about him had already reached the capital. Karen says that according to Xerath, even before Halo returned, the Emperor's letter had already arrived, and he wonders if the Emperor's intelligence network is really that good. He says he knows that the current Emperor is just a puppet, and that he must be backed by a network of powerful nobles. An awkward silence hangs in the room, and Halo tells him that if he doesn't want to, he doesn't have to go. The chief thought that the boy must have realized what it would mean to go to the capital at this time. The noble houses there would surely want to confirm who he is, and that it might be wiser not to attract attention. So avoiding the capital is an option. Pale looks at Halo and wonders why his father is giving him a choice, since he is not obliged to go. But interrupting his thoughts, Karen says that of course he will go. He will even see his maternal grandfather after a long time. But he asks if he is going alone, saying that Leo was also on a mission with him. Halo says that if he goes, Leo will accompany him, and Hans's squad will guard him. Karen asks why he needs guards if his grandfather is there. Halo says he shouldn't flatter himself. They weren't assigned because he's special, but because no one knows what trouble he will cause next. That was the end of it. In 3 days, he would be leaving. Sometime later, in the barony of Belize, they conclude their negotiations. Everyone is sitting at the table, including even 2 little boys. Pale thanks them for their efforts and asks Rohan if his father knows about these conditions. Rohan says, of course, since his father agreed. The shares in the mine would be 80% for the Restons and 20% for Belize. And since magical crystal stones were so profitable, even a small share would guarantee considerable wealth. But the condition of transferring 5% of that 20% to Caron and Leo is puzzling and quite disadvantageous for the Belize family. Of course, the two did a good job of fulfilling their request. But for a simple commission, it seems excessive. For the best graduate of the Imperial Academy to make such a decision is too great a reward for a commission fee. Rohan says it is to win the favor of the 2 young blue wolves. Pale says he is not even trying to hide it. Rohan continues, saying that he is making an investment in the 2 who will one day lead the fortress. Pale says he is shameless, but he respects it, and that it is a bold decision, that Baron Belize is lucky to have such an outstanding son. Rohan laughs, saying that he is certainly not nearly as brilliant as Pale. He then says that it is time to hear the children's opinions. Karen, of course, is greedy for money, and Leo is simply puzzled as to why he is smirking again. Karen says he will gladly accept it, that they can continue to build strong bonds from this moment on, and that it is truly an honor to work with such a great house. Back at the station, Leo tells Karen that he has a question. How are they going to divide the shares they receive? Karen says that naturally he will take 9, and Leo will only get 1. Leo asks if it's true that he's taking so much, and Karen asks why he's surprised. He says that they have been getting along well lately, so how could he say such a thing? Leo does not even want to argue and says that, of course, he will get 9. Karen tells him to remember what will happen if he changes his mind later. Pale watches this, saying that when they were younger, they used to fight and argue all the time, but now they've become inseparable. He only sees what he wants to see. But things aren't so good. The scene switches. Leo says he can't believe he's going to the capital, that he has only heard rumors and doesn't really know anything, asking what he should do. Karen tells him not to make such a fuss, and Leo says that they are about to meet the Emperor, so it's natural to make a little noise. He says they will be able to go to social events, and there are many beautiful women in the capital. Karen sighs, and Sabina says that the capital, Dacus, is a very fun place with lots of people, many of whom are strong. Leo asks what she is doing here, so far up, and she says it will be a very good experience. She says she came to celebrate their first mission, asking where their wine glasses are. Sharon asks why she is looking for wine glasses in a 13-year-old's room, and she says that as long as it can hold wine, any cup will do. She throws each of them a cup and says that Karen drinking and stealing wine every day is one thing, but asks Leo if he has ever drunk anything. He says he drank a couple of times because of Karen, and she sighs, saying that he made him an accomplice. Leo says it would be better for them to be scolded together, and she pours him a drink, saying that since the master is pouring, he shouldn't hesitate, and that they both grew up wonderfully, and Karen thanks her. Then she says it's been 3 years since she promised to train him, and that it's disappointing. She won't be able to see the chaos he'll wreak in the capital. Leo says he has heard that she will soon return to the North Sea, and begins to cry, asking if they will ever see each other again. She says that with such sentimentality, he will never even be able to talk to a woman in the capital. He is embarrassed, and she says that if he does go to parties, it would be better not to go with Karen. Leo asks why, and she says that given his looks, talent, and gift of gab, he must know what will happen. Leo realizes that his haircut really does make him lose his aura, and puts his hand on Karen's shoulder, saying that he will ruin his chances of getting married. Karen says it's not him, it's that awful haircut, and tells him to stop talking and just drink. Leo agrees, and as the night goes on, we see Halo drinking too. The whole family are alcoholics. Pale knocks on the door, and he tells him to come in. Pale asks if he called him, and Halo says yes. He heard that he finished the negotiations with Bellis well, and that they had transferred their share to the boys, which is surprising. Pyle says that the young baron's opinion seems to have greatly influenced his actions, and he called it an investment in their future. Halo says that Bella's son is definitely smart, and in any case, it's good to have reliability. It never hurts. The matter concerning Bellis will be entrusted to Pale, who says he will do his best. Halo pours him a drink. Pale thanks him and thinks that his father is a man who is stingy with praise, so there must be another reason why he called him. Most likely it has something to do with Karen's trip. Halo says that as far as he knows, His Majesty has never summoned anyone but him directly. And in that sense, Karen's summons to the capital is very unusual. Pale says he knew what it was about, and Halo says that during this private audience, he saw it again. His Majesty had a very frightened look toward him. This stems from the fear that, since he overthrew the evil emperor, he could overthrow him too, and so he thinks that perhaps another influence played a role. Pale asks if he thinks it's politics, and Halo says yes. Pale says that given the political situation in the capital, where powerful houses are rallying together, couldn't he have simply refused His Majesty's request, but for some reason did not do so? Halo says that is correct. Pale asks if he is allowed to know why. Halo laughs, saying he wants to know the measure of Karen's vessel. This catches Pale off guard, and Halo says that he was chosen by his ancestors' blade, and whether he likes it or not, he is destined to stand at the center of their family. Not only that, but as a member of Reston, he will inevitably face tests from outside forces, and he will continue to face countless threats. That is why he did not refuse the request. If he is to shoulder the future of their house, he must be able to withstand it. He asks Pale if he is worried, and drinks his glass. Pale begins to drink in one gulp, so hard that he starts coughing. Halo laughs a little, and then he hears his son. Pale says he wants to be honest. He really trusts his son. Halo stares at him intently, smiling, looking proud of his descendants. He says that this is definitely a good answer. The scene shifts to the languid night streets of their fortress. The next day, Sabina has prepared a horse for them. Xeris asks if she really isn't going to say goodbye to the young gentleman. She says it's okay, since she drank with them and had a good time last night. Xeris asks why everyone steals his booze, and she says that, besides, they will be busy leaving for the capital today, so it is better for her to leave quietly, and she will wait for the day when they meet again. He says he will keep the wine rack full until then. As she starts to leave, she stops and looks up at Karen's window, where the boy bows to her. She smiles, saying she will see him next time. So she sailed back to the North Sea, which is like home to her. She tells Karen that he is always welcome to visit, and she will be waiting with good wine. The main character says with surprise that she left, leaving only a letter. Now that she is gone, even his uncles may begin to take action. One of his uncles immediately approaches him and says that his aunt has also left. Karen says, "Speak of the devil and he shall appear." Thales is right there. The scene changes abruptly. Heinrich asks if all the young gentlemen's luggage has been loaded. They answer yes, continuing to chatter about their clothes. Karen asks Xeris why they are making such a fuss about their departure. Xeris says that, of course, since the young gentlemen will meet His Majesty as representatives of the family, they need to present themselves in the best light. Karen agrees, but asks why Hans's squad is traveling with them. Xeris says it is for their own safety, and Hans adds that it is more likely because he is worried that Karen will cause trouble. Karen tells him to shut up, saying that with so many distractions around, it will be very annoying. Returning to the moment when Tails approached him, they greet each other. Tails asks if he is going to the capital, and Karen replies that he is, to which Tails says that he actually has a request for him. Karen asks what it is, and Tails says he hopes he won't behave in the capital the same way he did in the fortress. He understands quite well what he means, so he says nothing more. Karen says, okay, noting that he is practically telling him outright that he was following him. Tails says that there are many enemies in the capital who want to tear their family apart, so if he gives them even the slightest reason, he will punish him personally. Karen thanks him for his words, saying he will live up to his expectations. Tails says that's good and that he must return safe and sound. Karen says okay and watches him leave, and then laughs, saying that he was going to punish him, and asks if he really thinks he can suppress him just because he is the first prince. And he will make that arrogant face contort with pain, telling him to just wait for the future. Back to the present, the preparations are complete. Karen tells Hans that if he keeps annoying him, he won't let it go. At that moment, the bald assistant runs up to them and apologizes for being late, and thanks Karen for giving him another chance. Karen says that the truth is that he is taking him to the capital only to throw him in prison, and advises him not to let his guard down. Ura asks if he is serious, and then Hans receives a small notification that everyone is on board. Hans tells Ziers that they are leaving now, and Ziers tells them both to make sure they don't cause any trouble in the capital, and Karen says that anyone who sees them will think they are hooligans. Ziers says that the cracked bowl leaks both inside and out, but it's time for them to leave. Before leaving, they hear Pale calling him, barely in time. He says he didn't know he was here in the fortress, and Pale replies that his grandfather summoned him here. But more than that, he wanted to see him one more time before leaving, and that his maternal grandfather is eagerly awaiting his arrival in the capital. Karen says he can't wait to meet him either, and bets that he has prepared many gifts. Pale smiles, putting his hand on his son's shoulder, and asks him to return safely and not to cause too much trouble. At that moment, Leo starts laughing, so the main character gently asks him to shut up. As they are about to leave, we see Tails hear the sound of a train and looks out the window, saying that it means they are leaving. Someone informs him that they have received information that the second prince's wife is plotting something in the capital, but he says he has no reason to get involved. The train starts moving, and Karan says it's about time, asking Hans how long it will take to get to the capital. He says about 6 hours, and they will be passing through the autonomous territory of Tabe. Karen asks what that is, and Leo asks if it is that unusual city where commoners directly elect the mayor, and where, unlike agriculture, trade and industry are more developed. Karan asks if it is the place where the most money circulates in the empire. Han says that is exactly why money is equal to social class there, because they influence the empire with their enormous capital, but they are also often strictly controlled by the lords of other regions. Karen says he remembers being taught that sometimes serfs flee from the tyranny of evil lords and run to this territory, but Hans informs him that they are friendly with their fortress, sometimes even commissioning large-scale missions from their knights. Karen says that if the chance arises, he would like to visit them sometime. The train announcer announces that they will soon be entering the territory, and Karen says that maybe he will slip away after the schedule is completed. Leo says that he would also like to go, but then the main character starts to hear a sound, looks back and sees that his sword is reacting to something. And such a reaction means that danger is near. He wonders if Tails or Ringo sent someone to the entourage, but says that they couldn't possibly be that stupid, and realizes what it must mean. He orders Hans to contact the territory immediately. Hans asks why, but the protagonist replies that there is no time to explain, that the others must be warned to prepare for an attack. He begins to carry out the order, and Krun says that if the threat is from outside and not from within, it's interesting how they plan to attack a moving train. We see a fuse laid out on the ground, as they have placed a bunch of barrels of explosives along the railroad tracks. The man raises his hand, saying it's time. As they start to light it, we see a whole group. He tells them to hurry up and finish as the train is approaching, and the fuse finally ignites. A spark flies toward the barrels. The leader of the saboteurs tells everyone to get ready for the explosion, and the train enters at full speed. And the explosion is so powerful that all the birds in the nearby forest scatter. Returning to Tabe territory, they discussed how the National Tax Service was really cracking down on them. One of the guys said it was because he had been caught laundering money, and as they begin to argue, both sides tell the mayor that he needs to speak up about it. The mayor, however, simply says that he should not have come here in the first place, and should have just retired after serving as finance minister, and he can't believe he agreed to take this job in the first place. He says he thought it was an attractive city where opportunities were open to everyone, regardless of status. In this place where commoners, merchants, and noble merchants fight every day, this city is just a complete mess. Then a man runs up, calling out to him, runs up and whispers in his ear. He tells him he can go. The other people at the table ask what was so urgent that it interrupted their meeting, wondering if it had anything to do with their tax investigation. He says it's nothing as pathetic as that. Lighting a match, they ask what he's talking about, wondering why he doesn't care about taxes, and then ask if maybe the audit has been canceled. He says not exactly, but rather that he sent the tax inspectors to hell. 5 minutes ago, a train bound for the capital and departing from Reston exploded, and he heard that the Grand Duke's grandchildren were on board. They ask him to explain in more detail, and he asks if they really don't understand. It means that they are all practically dead now. Because of what happened to his grandson, the scene shifted to the train. Karen was inside and, thank God, alive, but badly battered. He sits up when he sees Hans. Hans asks if he is okay, and Karen replies that he is fine, while we see him bandaging Leo. Hans then asks his pendant to report on the situation. He is told that 11 people have been injured in total. One is seriously injured, and only 2 others are slightly injured, and the seriously injured person is Gale. Urha reports that there are 2 dead in their car, and Karan says that the situation is so bad that even Ura is reacting. Sharon asks Hans if he knows where they are now, and Hans says that they are about 10 kilometers from Tabe territory, and they contacted them before the young gentleman woke up. So the squad should already be on its way, and that he and his team will buy some time, so they should both run as far away as possible. He asks Karen if he understands what he is saying, but Karen just stares at his blade because it is reacting again, and he understands that this means they are close. Then he notices their feet outside the window. He tells Hans he's sorry, but it won't be possible. Hans asks why not, and Karan says that these are the ones who destroyed the Emperor's precious railroad, and they have committed an act no different from treason, and there is no point in running away from such scum. Then he asks Leo if he can still fight, and Leo says he can. Karen instantly cuts off the legs of one of the guys, saying that there is only one way out. The other attackers see the guy fall to the ground, and the guy with the severed leg looks up at Karen, who is glaring at him fiercely. Then he sends him flying with his next attack, saying that they just need to get rid of all of them here. When he, Hans, and Leo get out of the train car, he says there are more of them than he thought. The rest of the knights now get off the train, and they all start a crazy game of staring contest, Wild West style. Hans says they're all at least 3-star level, and Karen says he can see that, and the guy in front is at least 6-star. The attacker tells him that he must drop his weapon and surrender, and Karan instantly realizes that his voice has been altered by magic. The man continues, saying that if he cooperates quietly, they will let the knights and servants go. Karen then informs them that their goal must be to capture him alive, and asks if he knows what that means. Hans says that he certainly does not think to do what he thought, and Karen says that of course he does, and lunges forward. He says that means they cannot kill him, and he can attack them without fear. Hans and Leo just look at him like he's crazy, and the attackers come towards him. The guy was no slouch either, and was also preparing to meet them. Karen defeats one of them in the blink of an eye, and the rest begin to advance, but the knights also rush into battle. While everyone is fighting their opponents, leaving limbs and sparks from metal on the ground, Charon continued to kill several opponents at once with a single blow, and shouts at them with his vicious azure aura not to attack one by one. Let them come in groups. But he sees that the killers are a little hesitant and asks if he should go instead of them. The killers begin to say that this was not in the terms, and the leader orders these cowardly dogs to step aside, as he will personally deal with it. Krun says that it's high time he intervened. He will destroy the leader. But Hans runs out in front of him, catching him off guard. Hans tells him that this is a dangerous opponent and that he needs to retreat. But the killers tell Hans that he is rushing to his death, and Hans replies that they will have to wait and see if that is the case. Hans jumps into the air, and the assassin prepares his blade. When they begin to clash, sparks fly. The assassin suddenly realizes something and understands that he must do something, and instantly deflects the blade, causing Hans to hit the floor. Hans also begins to understand what is happening. Since the killer instantly parried his attack, he easily dodged it. He says that judging by his movements, he now understands that this 6-star is a knight of the Sultanate of Pajar in the empire named Shi and Hakim. The empire and the Sultanate are bound by a non-aggression pact. But why Karen? The Sultanate and the House of the Grand Duke have no quarrels. What could be the reason? He will have to find out directly after all. The tide of battle has now turned in their favor, as the young lords are defending so well. Hakimi launches an attack, forcing Hans to retreat, and asks if he really has time to be distracted. He notices that there are Blue Wolf Knights nearby. Hans tells him that their formation has already collapsed and shouts his name. Then he begins to unleash his aura, throwing him back and slowing down the pace of the battle. Hans warns him that resistance is futile and that he should surrender. Hakimi says that he now sees that his group has fallen, and Hans tells him that if he surrenders, at least his life will be spared, and there is no need to die on foreign soil. Hakimi tells him that he has no intention of persuading those who refuse to understand, so he will only fulfill his mission. His eyes instantly turn black and red, and Hans says it's because of burst blood vessels. As his aura begins to take on a different hue, Hans says that this is called a reverse mana flow, which means he has no intention of returning alive. He is prepared to sacrifice himself. In this situation, not only will it be impossible to capture him, but both young gentlemen are in danger. And so he also allows his mana to spiral out of control, beginning to prepare to take the attack head-on. Hakim approaches, and Hans decides to let his mana explode. His eyes open and turn bright blue. Karen, however, appears behind him and tells him he is disappointed. Karen says he thought he had come with him to keep him out of trouble. Hans is shocked by this turn of events, and Gigi says that it seems like he is the one creating them, and asks if he has already given up his role. Hakimi turns around, surprised that he is attacking, and asks what he is doing. If he is so brave, let him show himself. And Karen says he will only do what he wants and what he himself wants, and rushes forward, cutting off Hakimi's arm, which flies off to the side. Hakimi then breaks the distance, everything is in place, the arm falls to the ground. The killer stands without looking at the others and tells Karen that he is a monster. Karen asks if this is praise, saying he will accept it, but then notices that his blade is starting to resonate again and says that this means the threat still remains. He asks Hakim what exactly he is plotting and realizes that there was a deal with the Sultanate and asks if the assassin understands his title. Hans stands and watches, trying to comprehend the situation. Hakimi says he holds no grudge and that the boy should not worry about his future. Karen simply asks what he is talking about. As his mana begins to rage even more, Hans instantly realizes what is happening and orders all members of the squad to protect Leo. Leo just sits there staring, looking completely confused, and everyone rushes to protect him as quickly as possible. Hans does the same to Karen, suddenly jumping on him and forcing him to fall to the floor. Meanwhile, energy continues to gather and be released in the killer's body. The main character asks Hans what he is doing, and Hans tells him that it's a self-destruction spell and apologizes to the main character because he didn't understand it right away due to his incompetence. As the mana continues to swirl furiously, we see Hakim's body begin to disintegrate, and Hans tells the main character that he must survive, followed by a powerful explosion that completely eclipses the previous one. And Hans covers Karen with his body. Then Karen hears a voice in his head calling him a fool and saying that since he allowed them to taste the fresh blood of the knights after so long, they will do their part. If he doesn't want his eyeballs to burst, he needs to close them tightly. Finally, he comes to his senses and starts to wake Hans up. He asks how long he's going to lie there and kicks him. Hans says he rushed to defend him, asking where the respect is. And Karen says he never asked him to save him. Then he hears the voice again, saying that if it weren't for them, it wouldn't have ended this way. Then he says that now that he thinks about it, it's interesting where that came from, and looks at his blade, and the voice continues, saying that he would probably have turned into nothing more than scraps of flesh, and he should be grateful. Karan ignores him, and Guillotine continues, asking if he is even listening. Karen is simply surprised that a sword can talk and says that it talks too much. The thing is, he didn't know it was an ego sword, and we see an example of how much bigger the second explosion was than the first. The soldiers begin to help each other out of the rubble, while Karen is still fixated on the ego sword, and says he heard that mad blacksmiths forge blades from souls that can talk to you. Guillotine says that if he compares it to a demonic sword again, he will cut off his head. Karan says that if he cut off his head for such a trifle, why did he save him in the first place? Guillotine calls him pathetic, saying that if they hadn't used their magical power to save him from the explosion just now, they would have already cut off his head. Another carriage approaches, and Hans wonders if they are new enemies. But Karen says definitely not. Guillotine says that all the accumulated magic has been depleted and they are exhausted. Karen asks if the only way for them to absorb magical power is to cut down enemies. And Guillotine says that if he wanted to, he could also absorb magic from his blood. The knight introduces himself as the captain of the Tabe Territory's mercenary corps, named Hirai. Karan says that if he craves his master's blood, then he is indeed a demonic sword. Hans introduces himself, and Guillotine says he doesn't want to return to his sheath. He won't be able to talk to him anymore. Karen says that's perfect because he needs to stop talking. He then sheathes it while Hans introduces Karen to Hirai. Hirai says that the Tabe Territory feels responsible for dragging him into such an unfortunate event. By order of the mayor, they are here to safely escort the members of the Grand Duchy. Karen says he understands, and in that case, they have many wounded, so they are counting on him. The scene changes. As they get into the carriage, We see Charon sitting in the back, covered in blood. Hans says he wants to make sure that he doesn't think they should just return to the fortress. The guards and knights are still investigating the scene, but who knows what the results will be and when. And it is too early to assume that the danger has passed. Karen says that everything is fine. They already contacted Ziers before leaving, and Ziers should be on his way soon, and that Hans' problem is that he thinks too much. The Imperial Guard from the capital was also supposed to advance, so there's no need to worry. More importantly, the man who blew himself up wants to know if Hans knew him. Hans tells him that it was a 6-star knight of the Sultanate of Pajar named Hakim. Sharon says that the Sultanate of Pajar is a neighboring state beyond the Desert of Silence in the Eastern Empire, and he wonders if the non-aggression pact has been shaken, saying that things are getting more and more complicated. Hans says that it is true that relations between the Empire and the Sultanate of Pajar have deteriorated, but this is not the kind of trick they usually pull. Curran says that the very fact that this has happened is sufficient grounds for war, and asks Leo if he agrees. Leo says he agrees, but the truth is, he wasn't really listening, and we see his hands shaking as he clenches the blood-soaked uniform. He says he can't stop shaking. Sharon says he understands. It was the first time he had killed someone, so it's not surprising. Taking a life is not something you get used to, but he has to get over it, because that's what life is all about. The guard looks out the window, saying that they will soon arrive in the autonomous territory of Tibet, and then the main character glances at the city, saying that it looks pretty good. And everyone in the carriage, including Hans, agrees. Then the mayor welcomes them to the territory, saying that it is such a relief that they have arrived safely. The territory will do everything in its power to uncover the instigator of this incident, and of course they will cooperate fully with the Reston House investigation. He also starts to speak, but Karen interrupts him, saying that he knows they had nothing to do with the attack. Hans says that's right, so the mayor can rest easy, and we learn that his name is Jean. Hans says he seems completely different from when he was finance minister. Jean tells him not to mention it, as he knows it himself, and regrets taking the damn chair. He then apologizes for his rambling in front of his noble guests, and Karen tells him to speak freely, as he would rather not hear stilted formalities from his elder. Jean asks how he can speak informally with the blood of the Grand Duchy. Karen tells him to be sincere and kneel down. Jin says he misspoke and will gladly accept his kindness. Karen says that's fine, and they should move to another place to continue their conversation. Jin says they can do that. We see him pour Jean a glass of wine, saying that they were attacked by some smugglers because the attackers did not use the city's power. And they were attacked not with magical power, but with explosives that destroyed the railroad, and that he knows that such explosives can be obtained without going through the Weapons Procurement Agency. Gin says that's true. Karen says that the Weapons Procurement Agency is under strict control of the Empire, so it's practically impossible to steal its explosive stockpile. But what if the explosives were smuggled in from outside the Empire? For example, explosives manufactured in the Sultanate of Pajar. Jin realizes that he is right. Only the Empire and the Sultanate of Pajar are capable of producing high-grade explosives. Charon says that if any Tabe merchants are involved in such smuggling, it will put him in a very difficult position. Jin is surprised that his reasoning is so sharp and says that the probability of this is high. Karen says that if he didn't agree, he could be branded an accomplice. And with the idiots who run the smuggling rings, it's too easy to become a scapegoat. He tells Jean to remember one thing. Jean asks what that is. Then Karen tells him that this incident has damaged both the fortress and its knights. Jin realizes that he is cornered, and says that if he doesn't cooperate, he's finished, because Reston will repay his debts 10-fold and his grievances 100-fold. For now, he wants to change the subject and ask Karen how his father is. Karan asks if he knows his father, and Jean says of course, because he is like a brother to his father. Karen says that his sudden theatricality confirms that he is indeed a politician. Jin sweats nervously but says that performance is the most important thing for people. Then Jin's assistant bursts in, saying that they have finally received a call from the capital, and Jin says it's time for the Imperial Guard to move in. The man tells him that it's not just the Imperial Guard, but the Commissioner of the National Tax Service himself has left, leading the 1st Special Division. Jin begins to worry because this is the man they call the Demon King. His name is Commissioner Gale Perrotin. He is from the National Tax Service, and Jin asks if Gale is really going that far alone. He asks Karen if he knew about this too, and Karen says yes, because his grandfather adores him. He will do everything he can to save his grandson. The scene switches. Somewhere in the autonomous territory of Tebe, people have come out into the city, and after a while began to look around and notice something. They saw a bunch of armed soldiers going inside, and behind them all was none other than Gale himself. The people in the alley noticed them passing by. They were wearing masks and confirmed that they did not think he would arrive so quickly. That's because it concerns a member of his family after all. Returning to the mayor's office, people ask why there is a sudden tax audit and why it had to start tonight. He couldn't possibly expect them to pass the audit without any preparation. Even if he's a puppet mayor, he should have at least bought them some time. And they can't deal with the first special division, damn it. Gene says that these bastards are acting like this even after all the leniency he gave them, wondering if they really don't understand the seriousness of the situation. Karen suddenly entered the room with the team and told them all that the mayor was right. Not only did they destroy the railroad tracks, which are the property of the emperor, but the Duke of Reston's grandchildren and the staff from the fortress were attacked, and this was done with explosives that are believed to have been smuggled in through the Merchants Guild. He was pleased with his oratory skills because surely now everyone understands what is happening. The merchants understand that they will be inspected, and one of them says that he tried to say that they should have had time to prepare. Karen asks the speaker's name, and he replies that his name is Viscount Humor from the Humor Trade Guild. Karen says he understands and will be sure to pass his name on to his grandfather, the commissioner of the National Tax Service. They ask him to reconsider. Then the door swings open, and the first special department enters with its head, who is introduced as befits such a person. Everyone is surprised to see Gale, and Gale says that from now on, they will begin a tax audit of the trade guilds. The tax service has received a tip about the circumstances of illegal accumulation of wealth through smuggling and tax evasion. His Majesty the Emperor has ordered a thorough investigation. Karen says that he is indeed someone who looks better in a military uniform than in a civil servant's uniform. Leo asks Hans if the first department is really that scary, and Hans says that the first department is the department that deals with large merchant guilds and nobles. And since they deal with such high-ranking figures, they can mobilize the Imperial Guard. Leo says he thinks it's scary that you can be beaten up for not paying taxes. Gale then approaches, saying that 3 years have passed, and warmly asks Karen how he has been. Karen says yes, telling his grandfather that he is glad to see him. The scene changes to the street. His grandfather asks if he is sure he doesn't need treatment, and Karen says he's fine. Gale asks if he has anyone in mind, and Karen says no. Gale says it's definitely not a family matter. Karen says his uncles would never have left any clues. On the other hand, those who planned this left clues for everyone to see, as if they wanted them to conclude. It was the work of the Sultanate of Pajar, and they have no intention of hiding their identity. Unexpectedly, Gale strokes his grandson's head, saying that he surely wants to find the culprits and punish them himself, but as his grandfather, he is against it. It's not that he doesn't know about his talents, but the world is vast and full of powerful people. Besides, there are still threats directed at him here, so they should just sit quietly and go to the capital tomorrow morning. His Majesty the Emperor has ordered it. The adults will take care of it, Karen says, of course, laughing, and says he will stay right here. His face shows no resistance. His grandfather, however, sees that he has no intention of keeping this promise, because Karen releases an aura from his eyes and laughs. He just said it so as not to upset his grandfather. At the residence of a merchant named Oh Hyun, they hurriedly leave, loading everything into the carriage. Oh Hyun runs out, asking why they haven't left yet, wondering what they are doing. They say that everything is ready now, and his wife asks if he really isn't going with them. He tells her not to worry as he will follow them soon, and when they leave, they tell him to follow quickly. He says he had to evacuate them first. Now it was noticeable that someone was watching from the roof of the building. The spy says on the walkie-talkie that they are being followed, and he is told that there must be no mistakes, so he should continue surveillance. Meanwhile, Karen is cleaning the guillotine. Suddenly, Xeris walks in and says, "Just think, he's polishing his sword in the middle of the night. He wants to know if he is planning to cause trouble again." Curran says he didn't expect him to start sawing him up as soon as he arrived, and Xeris just looks at him for a second, saying he thinks the commissioners have forbidden him to leave. Karen continues to do something with his sword and asks if he will try to stop him too. Xeris says that he is only here to convey the orders of the head of the house, and that he will deliver them, so the boy should just listen. He says that the moment he receives this order, he must find the guilty ones. and make them pay with their blood for the lives they took, and show them what the laws of the fortress are. Sharon starts laughing and says that he had been planning to do this for a long time, and gladly accepts this order, clutching his sword in his hand. Zir says that it looks like it's going to be a long night. The scene changes. Karen and Leo begin walking through the city, and Leo asks if they really need to go so far. Karen says that if they want to meet the informant, they need to go to the black market. Leo says he understands but wants to know why he is playing the role of a servant. Karen replies that it is because they are going to a criminal area. And if a pair of noble children wander around unaccompanied, it will only arouse suspicion. He says he understands but asks again why he has to be the servant. Karen ignores his question and asks him to be quiet. They will soon reach the place Xeris mentioned. As they continue down the alley, Leo says that the place seems unsettling. Karen tells him that if he is afraid, they can turn back right now. Then a man says that this is not a place for young lords to visit. He stood mysteriously by the wall and said that if they had come here, it could only mean one thing. Karen immediately reaches for his sword, but the man says that Xeris sent him and that it is an honor to serve them. He introduces himself as Julio, half of his face covered with a scar, and said it was time for them to move on as the refuge was already prepared. The scene changes immediately. Julio opens the door, saying that there are soundproofing devices installed inside so they can talk freely, and the main character asks if it must have been difficult for him to get there from outside. Julio says he is from Tabe himself. He wants to know how someone from Tabe became an informant for the Reston family. Julio says he is only repaying the kindness that Xeris showed him when he was a child. Karen says he understands and they can get straight to business. He has received intelligence that someone intends to attack the Reston family with smuggled explosives. As soon as they head to the capital and asks if he knows who they are, he replies that he does. Where money is involved, there are only 2 trading companies that deal with explosives circulating on the black market. He shows them both companies, saying that the only 2 could be these, Karua and Caligo. However, Karua seems to have firmly established itself in Taba, and recently they have been leaving the black market. Then Karan asks, "What about Caligo?" Julio says it's a company made up of former slaves, and they'll take on any job as long as they get paid. He also learned earlier today that the members of Caligo have left the city. Karen says that if it was earlier today, and Leo finishes his thought, that's about the time they were attacked. Karen says that makes them very suspicious. A group of former slaves will do anything for money. There is also Karua, who is leaving the black market. Leo tells them they don't have enough time to investigate both and wonders where they should go. Karen tells them that the answer is obvious. The more desperate they are, the more reckless they will be, and they will go after Caligo. Julio says he will personally escort them to the black market. We return to Jean's house. He asks Gale if he is sure it is okay to leave the young master alone. Gale says that his relative even sent him a letter begging him to do so he has no choice. Gale says that wolves have their ways, but he still wants Tim to know that Karen actually asked him for a favor. He wanted him to find some excuse to delay his brother. Without the Duke's permission, he would have acted on his own. Gale seems surprised, but Jean tells him not to worry, as he has already proven his skills. Gale reminds him that Karen is only 13, and Jean replies that age is just a number for a genius. This guy should be put in prison. Gale says that this is Tabe after all, a place where danger can strike at any moment, and some companies here have even bribed capital politicians to expand their power, and that he knows that many powerful houses here are wary of the Reston house. And Tabe is full of those who will do anything to win the favor of these houses, because that's what this city is really like. This is what worries him, and this is why His Majesty intervened here, to prevent the empire from being ruled solely for the benefit of such people. Jean says he thought he would be able to enjoy his later years in peace, but it seems that will not be the case. Gale says that for now they just need to wait until Karen safely completes his investigation. Jean says there is one more thing he should know. Sir Mason is here in Taba. Gale asks if he means the unbreakable shield Mason, the 8-star knight. If that's true, it's bad for them. We return to Julio. He says they have arrived, and Caron, standing in his cloak like everyone else, asks if this is the only entrance. Julio says yes, and Caron remarks that in that case, in an emergency, they could simply seal it from the inside, which is rather creepy. He pulls on the book, activating a hidden lever, and Karen says that this is certainly suitable for the black market, and Julio says it's time to go down. When they finally do, Leo gets the feeling that it won't be easy for them to get inside, as two guards come out to block their way. They say they haven't seen each other in a long time and ask Julio what he's doing there. Julio says he brought guests. They say they know he only works with big clients, but unfortunately, the chairman has ordered them not to accept clients today, so they will have to turn back. Julio asks why, and they reply that it is simply an order from above. Julio still asks for a reason, and they say they don't know either, and that they should just leave while they are still being polite. One of them starts to take out his blade, and Karen asks if he's really trying to chop them up with that toothpick. He then reaches for his own, telling him to go ahead, as he wants to see what happens. Leo asks why he is pressuring him like this, but Karen continues, saying that if he's going to do it, he should hurry up and get his blade out. Then the main character commands him to take a backseat, and Leo wonders what that means. The guards reach for their blades, and Leo does too, because there was no backup plan from the start. The guard who drew his blade first says he has no choice, but the second one tells him to wait a second. Then Guillotine tells Karan that he'll say this just in case. He refuses the blood of bastards like them on his own behalf. Karen asks how he can talk when he hasn't even drawn his sword, and Guillotine replies that as long as he's touching the sheath, it's possible. Karen swings first and the guard blocks the attack. Karan says that must be very convenient, and we see that the guy's sword has actually broken in half. Another guard asks what the hell he's doing, but then freezes for a moment, because Leo is charging straight at him. Julio says that's exactly what he expected. That's the kind of skill he expected from the young wolves of the Reston family. When Leo also disarms the guard, he tells Karen to warn him next time he pulls something like that. Karen says he looked like he enjoyed it. Julio says that's why Zaires made them roam the streets of Tabe at night. Karan, however, continues, saying that he should start this hostage situation. Julio calls him awesome again. The guards ask if he really thinks he can get away with it and return safely. Julio is simply surprised that the nobleman is taking hostages, and Karan says that he should worry about that. The guard's chest then lights up red, and the woman says that's enough. She asks if they could stop, as he is being too rough with her people. Karen asks if this means that President Caligo cares about his subordinates. She says, of course, as these people were with her during the most difficult times, and that is why she cannot allow them to be torn apart by some overexcited young wolf. Leo says that it seems she knows who they are, but she invites them in. Aaron says it's a good offer, but there isn't exactly a foundation of trust between them, so her people will have to wait and stay as his hostages. He says he definitely has a passion for taking hostages, as the rumors say, and she will wait. She tells a guard named Cal to take good care of them. Cal says he will do as the president wishes. The scene changes. We return to Gale. He says that if Mason is here, it means one thing, and that he is here with one person. Jean says it is most likely it will be the Emperor's bastard troublemaker, the sixth Prince Lavalios. Jean asks what he is so worried about. The old man just grunts in response. Gale says that His Majesty personally removed Mason from the Imperial Guard and assigned him to protect His Highness, the sixth Prince, but he is someone whose actions are incredibly difficult to predict. Jin says that since he is a magician, he probably just came here because of the wide variety of goods that are distributed here. Gale says he is concerned about the possibility of him and Karen clashing with each other. Jin says that surely nothing will come of it, but Gale warns him that Karen is the type of person who will create problems even where there are none. The scene changes to our squad. When they enter the room, Karen stops and is very surprised when he sees the guy in the golden mask sitting on the couch. He puts down his cup and asks if he is Karen. He says he knows him, which surprises the main character. He bows before him, saying he did not expect to meet him in such a place. But more importantly, the power he senses from the guard behind this man is something that belongs to a master who has reached the 8th star, just like Zaires and Sabina. There are only a handful of 8-star masters in the Empire, so who could he be? Leo notices this well, and Karen says that he is definitely not an ordinary master. And he says that he's definitely not President Caligo. The man replies, no, he just came to visit his sister. He says that if that's the case, it means he's the president's younger brother. He says that they are more like stepbrother and stepsister, but it's nice to meet him. Karen says that if they are stepbrother and stepsister, then he will try his luck, and launches an attack using one of the fortress techniques. Everyone is simply surprised that he did something so crazy, and the masked guy starts laughing. The guard exhales heavily. The chairman's brother tells Mason to watch, as he has become a hostage in the hands of the little warrior Karen. He says it's more exciting than he thought, and he knew coming to Tabe was a good idea. Lavilio then asks if he's going to threaten death or demand some kind of ransom, but Karen begins to ponder, saying that he has golden eyes and jet black hair, as well as an 8-star knight named Mason. This means that the one he is holding is the 6th prince. Levelios asks if he wants to stage a coup in the imperial palace. Karen says that this guy is definitely not in his right mind. And his sister finally enters the room, saying that she can see he has changed the hostages while she was away. We see that she is actually an elf, and she wants him to explain what is going on. He says he exchanged him for a more valuable hostage and asks what she thinks. She says she doubts he is that valuable, but wonders why he has suddenly switched to formal speech. He says it is because she is an elf, so she must be older. But he also senses a huge flow of magical power from her, and a similar flow of magic from Lavalios too. So they are definitely both magicians, although she is much more skilled. She says that if he is here looking for the source of the explosives used in the attack on their train, it wasn't them, so he can put down his sword and they can talk normally. He asks why he should believe this and agrees. And she says that if she were the one who attacked their family, she wouldn't have been so careless from the start. To leave any clues behind, her eyes flash purple. When she begins to demonstrate her magical prowess, Karen says that with such power, she is at least a 7th circle mage. And even Leo is surprised. And she asks him if he is in the mood to talk to them calmly now, or if he still wants to try to continue on his way with the hostage. After a while, Lavalius and Mason take off their masks, and the leader of Caligo says that, as she said earlier, the explosives used in the attack on the Reston family were not supplied by them. They are dealing with explosives, but it is strictly for experimental purposes. Karen then asks if it was the Karua traders. She says that this is not the kind of job that cowards like the Karua would pull off. Karen then tells Lavalios to take his damn hand away, and Lavalios asks what's wrong with him getting a little closer. And from now on, he can just call him Rio, like all his close friends do. Karen says, "What the hell are you talking about, close friends?" And Mason says that Karen should watch his language in the presence of the prince. Rio tells him not to be so stuffy, and Mason says he can't believe his brother's youngest grandson is such a hooligan. Karen wonders if he knows Galo, but the woman says it's time to get back to the main topic, and she apologizes for the late introduction. She tells us that her name is Poina, president of Caligo, and that it is an honor for her to meet the 2 great-grandsons of the continent's greatest hero, Gallo. As she mentioned earlier, the explosives from the attack were not theirs, but she can tell them who was responsible on one condition. Karen says that's what she thought, and she wants to hear what the condition is. She says her condition is that they simply befriend Rio. Both guys were completely shocked. Either they didn't want to be friends with him, or the request was too strange. He says that associating with the imperial family is a bit problematic, and it's obvious how people would perceive a friendship between the ducal family and the imperial prince. They wouldn't see it as a pure friendship. Rayo says, so what? Children can be friends with each other if they want to, and besides, it is more beneficial for the Reston family. Karen asks how. He says, of course, because the Reston family will soon have to make their move, and this will be a good way to alert the imperial family and the central nobles. Karen says he's not completely insane. Even if that's the case, he asks why he's going so far. Rio sighs, saying he is willing to do anything to annoy his father. His dream is to be a first-class disappointment, and he asks if Rio understands him. Karen thinks he's definitely not stupid, but he's also a certified madman. Poina then asks what he will do, as the nights in Tabe are long, but they don't have much time today. He asks what she means. She says that the Imperial Guards who arrived with Special Unit Number 1 have another objective. Karen asks what exactly that is, and she says it's the case where the Reston family's grandchildren were attacked. And yet the Imperial Guard is not trying to solve the case. She asks if he has ever wondered why. He asks if she is trying to say that the Imperial Guard is in cahoots with the perpetrator. She says that the answer to that might change depending on who the culprit is, but one thing is clear. The Imperial Guard's goal is different from theirs. She pulls out a document containing everything they have tracked about the perpetrator's movements in this series of events. And she wants to know if he will accept her offer and conditions. He stares at her silently for a long time. And later we see people moving more boxes, while Oyun watches, asking if they can move faster. We learn that he was actually supposed to receive a noble title, and that all the evidence against him would have been eliminated after the attack. He says that the title he craved is right in front of him, and now he is the one who is about to be eliminated. All because those damn brats survived the attack. But maybe it's a blessing, as he managed to evacuate his family first. And while he is pondering all this, a man suddenly rushes in, saying that knights are storming the place out of nowhere. And Oh-yoon is nervous, asking if it is the Imperial Guard. Then we hear Karen saying that Oh-yoon's merchants are working hard even at night. The assistant tells him that it is not the Imperial Guard, and Karen says that he has quite a busy business here. Oh-yoon recognizes him as someone from the Reston family. Karen says that's right. He's the same worthless nobleman he was trying to get rid of. Then he says that for a man who tried to take someone else's life, he seems to care terribly about his family. Ziers says he brought what he asked for, and Karen thanks him. Then he picks up the bloody bag, asking Oh-yoon if he is so curious to see what is inside. Oh-yoon panics, asking if it is his family, and Karen tells him that if he's so curious, he should look for himself. When he opens the bag, he sees hands, which he believes belong to his family members, and he begins to break down. Karen slaps him, telling him to stop making a scene, and asks if he really thinks these calloused hands belong to his family. Oh-yoon asks if they don't belong to his family, then whose hands are they? Karen says they belong to the killers his business partner sent to harm his family. Oh-yoon starts crying, thanking him for saving them, and Karen tells him to stop celebrating. He conspired with them and planned the attack on his family, and people died because of it. He saved his family only because they are innocent, but he is not. He will spend the rest of his life in the underground dungeon of the fortress, of course, with endless torture. He tells Ziers to take him away. He says he'll be happy to do so. We return to Poina. She says there are many rumors circulating about the Emperor's poor health, and she wants to hear from Reo about the situation in the capital. He says that there is chaos among the nobles because of this, and only the old farts who insist on war are having a great time, and that the internal conflict with the Imperial Guard is getting worse. She says the clash between those who have allied themselves with the warmongers and those who are not, he is strengthened, but thanks to her, he has found a reliable supporter. He thanks her and then says that Karen is definitely on his side now, thanks to his charm, and she says that he wasn't like that when they first met. He says it's true. As soon as he arrived in Tabe territory, having barely escaped internal strife, his mother was killed right before his eyes and the blood stained the grass red. And if Mason hadn't been there then, he probably would have followed his mother to the grave. If he hadn't met her in the city, he would never have learned magic. And just as the two of them are the reason for who he is today, Karen will definitely become an important person in his future as well. Back at the mayor's place, we hear Gale asking him what this means. Jin says publicly, announcing the facts of the attacks and details of the investigation is too much. Gale agrees, saying that if it comes out, it will tarnish the family's prestige, and asks if he is okay with that. Jin just wants to know if he's going to hold Karen accountable. Karen says it's not something he'll have to take responsibility for. And this is just so that those behind the scenes cannot even think about hushing this matter up, and that Jin will become, in the eyes of the people, a righteous mayor who stands up to injustice. Ziers remembers how Galo told him to let Karen do whatever he wanted, and he doesn't know what he's planning. But since it's his master's order, he can't go against him. And he'll just have to watch as Karen tells everyone to just trust him on this. We return to the Reston house. The butler informs Galo that a message has arrived from Karen. Gallo asks if he's really trying to announce the details of the investigation and the damage from the attack. Dvoretsky says that's correct. And then Pale comes in, asking if he was summoned. Gallo says yes, as a message from Karen just arrived, and he tells him practically the same thing he just read, and that the council promised full cooperation to prevent something like this from happening again, and he asks Pale what he thinks. Pale reads it but says it's a plan, which could destroy the political balance in Taba, and is about returning power to the mayor, who until now has been nothing more than a figurehead. Gallo says that while the council members have had enormous power up until now, the announcement that a council member was involved in a terrorist attack would be a significant blow to them. And he is a reckless brat to the core, but this time he succeeded in his revenge. This also allowed their family to further strengthen their influence over Taba. Peel says he's grateful that he values his son's abilities so highly, but reminds him that he is only 13 years old and that he is entrusting too much responsibility to a young boy. Gallo interrupted him and reminded him that it was he who told him to believe in his son. And then the grandfather says that the wolf must go the way of the wolf, and he knows that he is worried about his child, who just took his first step into the wild. But how about he believes him until the very end, as he promised? Pale says he will. This almost satisfies the strict ruler. And then Galo says that he is grateful to him, and that should serve as sufficient warning to anyone in the capital, and to those lackeys of the imperial guard who cling to power. And he says that if there were anyone else here, they would certainly cut off all their heads. And he tells Pale to prepare for the coming storm, for it is time for the Restons to act again. We return to Taba. The mayor says he's ashamed that such an incident happened in their city. For a council member to stoop so low for a measly morsel of power, trying to kill the grandson of Galo, the continent's greatest hero. The citizens begin to rejoice, telling him to get rid of the rotten council members. And Jin says that in order to give the city back to the citizens, he will make sure that he puts all his efforts into it. Leo says he fits in like a fish in water, and Gale says Jean is a great politician. A great politician never misses an opportunity that comes his way. Leo asks if all politicians in the capital are like this, and he replies, of course not. The reason Jin was able to reach such a high position is because he has the skills to back it up. Leo says the mayor is actually much more impressive than he looks. Gale, however, is simply surprised that a plan drawn up by a 13-year-old child was approved by the family patriarch, and that Gallo undoubtedly values his abilities highly. At this rate, he might even be included in the line of succession, but whether it's good or not, only time will tell. The crowd continued to cheer. Karen tells Gale he has a question and asks if he is okay. Gale asks why he wouldn't be, and Karen says he's been drawn into a case that affects the Reston family. And he heard from his mother that he did not like it when personal interests intersected with his official duties, and he was worried that he had forced him to violate his principles. Gale says that sometimes there has to come a time when you have to break your own principles. And besides, it's not like he actually broke any rules this time. His Majesty the Emperor also planned to keep the powers that be here in check, so he completely agreed with everything that happened. And one day, if something like his principles gets in the way of doing the right thing, he should not hesitate to step over them. And he's got some business to take care of before he goes back to the capital, so he's running now. As he leaves, Leo asks Karen what part of the mayor's speech everyone loves so much. Karen says it's simple. The mayor announced that he would destroy the established powers, and if the firmly established powers collapse because of this, and other people will get the opportunity, so of course they are happy. Leo says that even if he says so, he doesn't understand. And Karen tells him that it's because he grew up like a flower in a greenhouse. Leo says that's not something one should hear from the richest family in their line. That night at Jean's, Karen tells him it was a great speech and that everyone has a lot of energy thanks to him. Jin says it's all thanks to him for giving him the right cause, and Karen says he's grateful he put it that way. Jin tells him that he is simply stating the facts and then wants to know about the knights. Karen says that additional troops have already been dispatched from the fortress. And Jin laughs, saying, as expected from the Duchy of Reston, they really are fast at everything. Leo asks if this is what they call playing politics. Jin says they still need to prepare for the capital tomorrow, but he's kept them too long. Karen says not at all. They also have something for him. He asks what it is, and Karen reaches into his suit and takes out a bag of money, saying that he will need a little here and there if he is going to do great things. As soon as he takes it out, Jin's eyes pop out of his head, and Karen tells him that it's just a small trifle prepared for profit, which they got from their magic stone mine in the territory of Bellis, and that it was their little secret. Leo, however, of course, never agreed to this. Later, we see them all ready to leave, and Zeers tells Karen that the carriage is almost fully loaded, and that the Imperial Guard will be responsible for escorting him to the capital. Karen says he doesn't like it, but Zeers tells him that the matter has been approved by the Patriarch. Leo says that if Hans is wounded, he wants to know if Zeers is going with him. He says that he would like to, but he was assigned to escort the prisoners and wounded, so Sir Hugo would be responsible for their escort instead of him. Karen says that Hugo is the son of his older uncle Tails, and a genius who reached the initial phase of 6 stars at the age of 28. Karen says he doesn't like anything about this, a new obstacle to his plan to wreak havoc in the capital. And then a car pulls up. Someone in it shouts a very loud greeting to the heroes. They are in shock. Lavalio climbs out of the window and starts greeting them. He waves from the window asking if they had breakfast. Karen asks if they should just not go to the capital, but Zira says they have to. Lavalio asks Karen if he's happy they're going to the capital together. He replies he's not particularly happy, but he wants to know what he's doing here. Lavalio says he knew he wasn't thrilled about being accompanied by the Imperial Guard, and he understands this given their difficult relationship, but he shouldn't worry, because he's still here with him. He says he was waiting for him. Then a man approaches them and says that he was delayed, finishing the business with the destroyed railway. Lavalio tells him everything is fine, and we learn his name is Ryuk. He says they should start with introductions and introduces Karen and Leo. Rook then introduces himself, saying that they can just call him by his first name, and it is an honor for him to accompany the descendants of House Reston to the capital. Karen thinks that the reason the Imperial Guard isn't actively investigating the attack on the duchy is because they're probably involved, just like Poina said. He asks if the destruction of the railway is really that important. Ignoring the attack on the descendant of the very family that placed the emperor on the throne is going too far. Rook says that the destruction of the railway, which His Majesty owns, is sufficient reason. Therefore, naturally, the Imperial Guard must give priority to the investigation of the act of treason. Karen gets annoyed, saying that if that's the case, he must have been busy, so they'll accept it for now. Lavalio says the conversation seems to be over, so it's time for them to go. Ryuk says, of course, and Xeris tells Karen that he restrained himself well, since there is no need to spoil relations with the Imperial Guard, especially before they find out who was behind the attack on their family. Karen says he's right, at least for now, and it's just a suspicion. But if he finds evidence that the Imperial Guard is acting as watchdogs for some other powerful family, he will crush them himself, and he cannot believe it. That the Imperial family could act as simple servants for some nobles. Even when he was forced to sell his soul to a demon, he never fell so low. The scene changes, however. Karen says along the way that it is quieter here than he expected. Lavalio asks if he wanted to chat or something, and Karen says no. Lavalio says he was curious about Mayor Tape's speech, saying he knows it was his doing, and that he is trying to make the mayor the center of power instead of the council, and is trying to use his family as support for this. Karen asks why he thinks that, and Leo tells him that all this talk about justice was nothing more than an excuse. By restoring the Reston family's prestige, which could have been shaken by the incident, it turned out to be a brilliant move to gain a reliable ally who would be useful in the coming power struggle. And he knows this was his plan all along. Karen says it looks like all the time he spent cozying up to the black marketeers wasn't wasted. Lavalio says you could say he came off the streets himself because he went through everything to survive, so he must have had enough instincts from the start. Karen says that sounds plausible. But then Leo starts hearing a sound in his pocket. When he takes it out, he hears Poina asking if he's writing well. He answers, of course, but it's a bit frustrating, as Karan completely ignores him. She says he shouldn't argue too much because they should be friends. Karen says they're not friends, and she asks what happened to their deal. He says he never agreed to her because he needed to hear the terms first. She laughs, saying he got her hooked. But he should think about it, since her offer wouldn't be bad for him either. He says they lack mutual trust to make such statements. She asks what he means, and he says that if he were to join forces with a merchant guild run by an elf without permission, his head could have been on the line in front of the elders. She says he misunderstood something. She wants to cooperate with him, not with his family and home. He asks why, and she says dash. Of course, because good products are always worth investing in. And of course, it's also true that Leo needs a friend. Karen says he dislikes the last part the most. And she says that if he needs more trust, he should just consider the information she gave him as a gift. And if he ever needs anything, he should contact her through the crystal spear, as that is all she has at the moment. Leo laughs, telling Karen that they should get along, and Karen says that the two of them are exactly the same in their egocentrism, and hands him the thing so that he can call her whenever he wants. Lavalio looks out the window, saying that it looks like they are almost there, and when Karen looks out the window and sees giant gates opening, welcoming him to the capital, and they drive straight into them. Inside, they head to where they will stay. Rayo tells him that if there's anything he wants to see, he should call. The tour is free. Karen says no, thank you. And Rio leaves, saying that they will see each other soon anyway, so there is no need to be upset. As he leaves, Ryuk says that he will go too. Karen thanks him, and Ryuk tells him not to thank him, and that they will meet later. As they drive away, Karen says that of course they will meet, but he doesn't know when. And then Leo asks if he knows what that brightly shining tower is. Karen tells him that it is a magic tower. Leo asks if this is the one with the magicians, and he says, of course it's in the name. It's not like they're night butterflies. Leo says she looks really cool, and Karen agrees. He says it looks like the mages spent a fortune on her, and it is completely different from what it was 50 years ago. The magic tower is finally starting to feel real now that it's in the capital. He smiles and says it's no different from returning to his own grave. Then suddenly Hugo says it's time, and when they turn around, they are surprised that they didn't even feel his presence. Leo starts twitching, and Karen says he didn't even sense his presence, so his level is definitely high. He's one of those people who are called the Empire's greatest geniuses. He says they've had a long journey, and they're doing well. Hugo says that if he's not mistaken, this is their first meeting. Karen says it's nice to meet you. Hugo tells him that if he had known that their youngest was so impressive, he would have visited the fortress earlier and met him. Karen says he's flattered by him, and he's as impressive as the rumors say. Leo's just wondering if everything will be okay with them, if they really think so. Then a woman comes out to greet them. Hugo turns around, and Karen calls out to her grandmother. She says it's been so long and he's grown so much. He says he's glad to see her. She says she's glad to see him too. She tells Leo that she's glad to see him too, and has now drawn up a bath so he can wash and rest. Leo thanks her. Karen says that Grandpa has some things to do, so he'll be a little late. She says that she was told in advance, and that they can go inside as they need to buy brooches for tomorrow's banquet. He needs to make sure he goes to bed early. They will move his luggage to his room as soon as he arrives. Hugo just stood there looking at his hand, and silently asked if his mana had really been thrown back. He says that when he sent out his mana to test his strength, but the protagonist used his own mana to face his, not a calm sea like azure mana, but mana like the furious waves of a raging storm. He remembers his father, Tails, telling him to keep a close eye on his cousins so they don't get into more trouble in the capital. Hugo says he's definitely someone to keep an eye on, and he wonders who Karen really is. The scene changes. After Karen takes a bath, he goes into his room and flops down on the bed with a loud exhalation of relaxation, saying that his mana really shouldn't have been sent without warning, and that Hugo is an unpredictable guy, although he is very different from Tails. But no matter, he returned to his grave after 50 years. So why not relax with a drink he stole from the prince's carriage? When he is about to open it, his gaze involuntarily falls on his blade, and so he pours a little more for Guillotine. Guillotine asks what it is, that he's looking for a free drinking buddy. Karen says he just needed someone to talk to, and Guillotine says, as expected, he's crazy, drinking with a sword. Karen asks him to understand that this place is like a grave for him. Guillotine says that she knows, but Karen finds this strange, since he never told him about it. Guillotine tells him that he read his memoirs, but Karen dismisses it, saying that's what he expected from a demonic sword. Guillotine says he's not one of those. Karen says the blue dragon said it was the sword he used in his past life. Guillotine says she doesn't know why, but it somehow became a magical sword. Karen asks if he has any memories from that time, but Guillotine says no, and when he finds the one who turned him into a magic sword, then he will cut off his head 1,000 times. But Karen tells him that he can only do it once. But he is also curious why he doesn't ask the blue dragon himself after he goes to the North Sea. Guillotine says that Karen is too weak for that, but Karen says he can just find out for himself. Guillotine says that sulking at a blade is childish. They continue their little squabble, but Karen says he needs to sort this out. He will unravel the true meaning of his second life. This should have been impossible without the intervention of some great power. Guillotine then says he wants some more drink. Then he comes over and pours him some more. The scene changes to the next day. That morning they took to the streets of the capital, all trying to sell their wares. Karen tells Leo that he's embarrassing him because he looks like a redneck when he's staring around. Leo asks what's wrong with that. But Hugo agrees, saying that as a member of the family, he needs to maintain his dignity and not look at the merchants. He also tells Karen to be respectful to his older brother when they are in public. And when they are alone, they can be informal, but in public, he must be polite for the sake of the family's honor. Karen asks if this means he can speak informally with Hugo when they are alone. Hugo changes the subject, saying that they are almost at the store. Karen wonders if he's ignoring him on purpose, and notices a clothing store that catches his attention. He asks Hugo if he can come in here, and Hugo says it's a place where they make clothes for the elderly. asking if he likes it. Even Leo says he seems a little old-fashioned, and Karen tells him that trends are cyclical. Leo asks if that's true, and Karen asks what the two of them know about fashion anyway. Leo says it's not that he doesn't know anything, but Hugo finds it a little strange and looks at it with his stupid eyes. When they enter the store, they are quickly greeted inside a luxurious couture atelier. The man says that for such young noblemen visiting his store, he wants to know if this is really normal and he is sorry, but he doesn't usually sew clothes that the younger generation children wear. But he will do his best to create an outfit for him, and he wants to know who exactly wants the clothes. Karen says it's for him, but he recognizes the old man as when he was Cain. He was much younger, and he says he told him many times that his outfit was very difficult to mend. Karen says he's sorry, but his skills are so good that he can fight without holding back. The guy said that if he just needed it fixed by next week, then he can do it, and he had really hoped for a quiet day before. Now he takes Karen's measurements, saying that since it's for the Grand Duke's grandson, he'll do his utmost. Karen is surprised that he instantly recognizes the family. He says, of course, it would have been more difficult not to recognize their coat of arms, since it was the permanent seat of Sir Cain, a close friend of the Grand Duke. Karen asks if he remembers much about him, and the old man says, of course, since he doesn't know what he was like for others, but for him he was a very warm person, although he is sure that he never even knew his name. Karen says that now that he thinks about it, in all the years he came to the store, he always just called him baby. But the surprising thing is that it feels good to be remembered. Karen then asks his name, and the old man finally tells him that his name is Luhan. And he instantly remembers how this old man introduced himself in exactly the same way from his earliest childhood, with a smile. Then a woman bursts in, asking Grandpa if he's heard the news that Cain's enemy, the grandson of the Grand Duke of Galo, entered the capital. But as soon as she begins to say this, she understands who is in the room with her. What a mess. She freezes, and Karen is simply perplexed as to why he is being called Cain's enemy. At the tailor's shop, Hugo exchanged brief greetings with an old acquaintance after a long separation. Someone approached Amy, reminding her of their last meeting at the tournament, which caused her slight surprise. Leo asked in amazement if this was really the famous Amy Altara in front of them. The main character asked if he knew her. His friend confirmed that this was the same fencing prodigy who had achieved 4 stars at the age of 17. Hugo quickly apologized for his cousin, explaining his lack of manners and temper. Amy, slightly embarrassed, merely nodded in response to the apology. Hugo then introduced Karen and Leo to Emi Altara, a member of the Imperial Guard. Amy immediately recognized Karen, calling him by name, which greatly puzzled him. She also addressed Leo, correctly pronouncing his name, which amazed the young man. Leo was amazed that he was recognized in the capital, especially by such a beautiful girl, and even thought about his sudden fame. Karen assumed that Amy had learned about them from the senior guards who accompanied them, noting her intelligence. Lujan began to make unnaturally polite conversation with Amy, asking if she had eaten, which clearly embarrassed her. She tried to stop his overly respectful treatment by reminding him of her status as a simple student. Hugo countered that she was too modest, as she was being tipped to be the future leader of the Imperial Guard. Then Karen asked why people called his grandfather Sir Cain's enemy, and the question hung in the air. Karen spoke about Cain, calling him simply a man who sold his soul to a demon. And even under this condition, he didn't personally spoil or harm anyone. So what's the problem? Corona snapped at Hugo, asking if he realized he had just said those words out loud. The girl immediately became furious and he asked, "How dare a guy say such a thing?" His words were taken as a grave insult to the honor of the great Sir Cain. Angered by Karen's words, Amy Altara formally challenged him to a duel. Karen, in turn, asked Amy a direct and awkward question, asking by what right she summoned him. Amy, gathering her courage, firmly stated that she was the heir to Sir Cain's will, trying to justify her actions. Karen countered this challenge with a caustic question, wanting to know what exactly was Cain's will that Amy spoke of so passionately. He continued his thought, cynically suggesting that even loyalty to the Demon Emperor might have been the result of a deal, rather than a free choice. Even in the face of such arguments, Amy continued to insist that Sir Cain, in his pride, would have remained loyal to the Emperor to the very end. Karen merely mentally noted the old-fashioned nature of such a concept of pride, looking at the girl burning with righteous anger. Karen concluded that he was dealing with a man with whom it was impossible to reach an agreement, and Amy reproached him for being excessively hostile to the future knight. The girl protested heatedly, declaring that her challenge was not motivated by personal feelings, but by the defense of Sir Kane's honor. But suddenly something happened in the girl's stomach. A sudden loud and strange sound alerted both boys. It was the girl's stomach growling. Quite unexpectedly, Karen offered his enraged opponent a good meal before the duel. Without giving Amy time to recover, he insistently demanded that she choose one of the meat options for the upcoming meal. Or suddenly, he abruptly demanded that they leave immediately and sorted things out in battle. Each one was stunned by the enormous mana suddenly felt in the air. Amy knew before that her rank with the guy was the same, 4 stars. But after feeling this power, she admitted that Karen's mana level was incomparable to that of an ordinary 4-star. Luhan, intervening in the situation, politely invited Amy to share a meal with Karen, making an assumption about her financial difficulties. He gently insisted that since fate had brought them together, they should enjoy a delicious meal together and put off sorting out their relationship. Hugo added that you need to eat regularly, to which Amy only reluctantly muttered in response. And the scene changed dramatically. Now they were all sitting at a table in an expensive setting and eating steaks. More precisely, they didn't eat yet, but watched as the girl greedily devoured pieces of meat. Embarrassed, the girl tried to explain her agreement to eat as a simple practicality, the need to fortify herself before the fight. The boy was surprised she could be embarrassed. Amy's tone suddenly became pointedly polite, but she quickly clarified that this should not be taken the wrong way, promising to return her share of the expenses. Karen dryly remarked that he could not accept serious promises on an empty stomach, continuing his line of behavior. And so the girl suggested sealing their agreement to duel and a shared meal with a handshake. She extended her hand to the guy. Karen's gaze fell on Amy's rough and calloused palms, which did not go unnoticed. He immediately recognized in these hands the proof of persistent and honest training without any tricks. Karen noted with a touch of irony to himself that if she didn't have such an old-fashioned character, she would be an ideal talent. And he took a deep breath and agreed to all the terms. Following this logic, Amy asked permission to order another additional dish for the table. The guy agreed, and Hugo just threw up his hands, allowing them to act as they pleased, noting their abrupt transitions from hostility to agreement. The ordering of a new dish was interrupted by the appearance of a new character, whose sudden attracted everyone's attention. The stranger looked into the room where Karen addressed the girl with a strange question, asking if she knew Professor Uris if she was interested in Kane. Amy confirmed that she knows and respects him. And then the guy said that Uris was his mentor in his youth, which aroused the girl's keen interest. The guy in green opened the door abruptly and told the servants that he would go inside alone. Karen, however, brought the conversation back to the practical side by asking about the time of the duel, and Amy liked his direct answer when they finished eating. The stranger had already approached them when Amy declared that in a fight with him, Karen could be beaten half to death without any concessions. Suddenly, a stranger in green turned to Amy, saying that she looked pleased. A strange smile appeared on his face, and he reprimanded Amy, saying that she should have contacted her brother first when she came to town. And how dare she, instead of meeting them, sit down here to have lunch with some troublemakers. This was followed by criticism of Karen, whom the stranger called a slacker, with whom it is not worth communicating at all. He adjusted his bangs. Karen responded with a sarcasm, asking if the guy in front of him was ready to eat dirt with his mouth. The guy didn't pay attention and grabbed the girl by the shoulders. Amy said that he had already paid the interest for this month. Her interlocutor retorted that he was not interested in the money, but in her personally, hinting at the benefit of a good relationship with the creditor. The main character sharply condemned the intrusion during the meal. Hugo calmly remarked that politeness required introducing himself first. De Gaulle asked with arrogant astonishment whether there was really anyone in the capital who did not know his name. He loudly introduced himself as a scion of the Kian Count's house, which immediately allowed those around him to identify his family. Karen dryly confirmed that he, of course, knew about this family, but he didn't know him. Karen gave a brief and unflattering characterization of the Kian family, calling them the capital's main moneylenders. De Gaulle, flattered, agreed that their name should be on everyone's lips, and boasted of his influence on the finances of the Marquis of Diaz's house. Karen cut him off abruptly, saying that he didn't know what he was talking about. He explained that he had not come to the capital for empty chatter, which left the impudent man completely perplexed. An enraged de Gaulle rudely asked whose offspring he was, clearly beginning to lose his composure. Leo turned to Hugo with a promise to explain everything properly to his grandfather, to which he reacted with poorly concealed foreboding. Karen merely showed the boy something in his hands with a snake-like grin. He showed him a vial of an expensive potion that instantly healed broken bones, emphasizing its value. De Gaulle furiously shouted at him to stop talking nonsense, to which Karen calmly asked him to clarify what exactly was nonsense. In a calm, almost methodical tone, Karen began his explanation. He clearly stated that he intended to personally take on the correction of his counterpart. Karen, with icy calm, assured de Gaulle that he had no intention of killing him. The only response was a painful and fearful groan. The scene moved to the fortress. Someone, shocked, repeated the demand to repeat what had just been said. The servant, with cold politeness, agreed to repeat his words. The bespectacled man stated the fact that Karen Reston, the grandson of the head of the family, was arrested by the city guard. Gale merely said that it had only been about 30 minutes since his arrival in the capital, and he had already caused trouble. The question about the cause of the incident followed, to which the narrator did not immediately find an answer. The official accusation of attack on de Gaulle by Kian, the youngest scion of the Kian family, has caused surprise. Grandfather remembered hearing this name in connection with a reputation for red tape and a playboy with the daughters of his debtors. Discussion confirmed that this was indeed the man in question. Someone admitted that the boy deserved a beating, but expressed confusion as to why Karen had taken him on, mentioning the brutal method of beating him with the use of a healing potion. It was explained that the Imperial Guard would investigate the matter, as the incident occurred between nobles. It was noted that the relationship between House Reston and the Guard made the situation difficult for Karen. Grandfather became concerned and decided he needed to intervene. He announced his intention to personally go to the Guard's office. They tried to stop him, doubting that Count Kian, known for his stinginess, would sit idly by. They broke the incredible news. The victim, de Gaulle Kian, wasn't demanding punishment, but rather asking for leniency for Caron. The grandfather was shocked. It turned out that Kian claimed Karen's innocence and took all the blame on himself. An eyewitness described a humiliating scene in which Kian tearfully begged for mercy for Karen and vowed to reform. Gale asked in amazement whether they were talking about the same de Gaulle Kian and received an affirmative answer. The question was asked in complete bewilderment. What kind of magic did Karen use to achieve this effect? The grandfather's anxiety was obvious, because rumors of Karen's actions would inevitably spread throughout the capital, and he didn't know how to explain this to his father-in-law. He tried to argue with himself, assuring that his influential relative would not act so rashly. Could it really be that Duke Galo personally sent Karen to the capital for such purposes? However, the thought stuck in his head, and he began to consider this possibility with horror. A frightening image of the Duke deliberately releasing this uncontrollable, rabid dog into the city arose in his imagination. Meanwhile, Karen, having finished his conversation, quite politely said goodbye to the head of the city guard. With ironic politeness, Karen promised the chief of the guard to visit his institution often, which horrified him. The boss timidly hinted that such frequent visits could cause inconvenience, but Karen was already ready to ask a new question. Karen asked directly whether de Gaulle would be dealt with properly, since he had even confessed, but the official referred to the jurisdiction of the Imperial Guard. Hearing doubts about the existence of such a rule, Karen promised to clarify this issue with his grandfather, Duke Gallo, stunning his interlocutor. To be on the safe side, Caron added that he would also ask the chief of the guard about his grandfather, causing him to panic. The frightened official fearfully inquired about the name of Karen's maternal grandfather. The name of Sir Gale, the head of the tax office, was mentioned in response, which only added to the chief of the guard's anxiety. Under pressure, the boss timidly promised to do his best, after which Karen's gaze fell on someone waiting for him in front. Hugo asked what the conversation was about that had changed the guard's behavior, but Karen simply waved it off. With irony, Karen suggested that it was simply a pep talk about serving justice. Hugo, closing the case, stated that he would not interfere with Caron, but tried to make a warning for the future. Hugo desperately asked Karen to at least warn him in advance before causing trouble, admitting that it was impossible to control him. Karen readily agreed to the proposal, But Hugo countered that any attempt at control would only make the situation worse. Despite this, Hugo still thanked the guy, receiving a nervous rebuke in response. Hugo merely expressed regret that such a respected man as his grandfather had been drawn into this unpleasant incident because of him. Amy, in turn, apologized to the guy, but he says that he even enjoyed it then. And she invited Karen to go and have some tea, to which, after a pause, he reluctantly agreed. An invitation to move on followed. Hugo desperately wondered what they should do if Karen wasn't just getting into trouble, but was deliberately creating it. A desperate idea flashed through Hugo's thoughts to buy some magic ropes in the Tower of Mages. Something needs to be thought up to somehow control this little monster. And now they were already at the sign of the tea establishment. The main character sat inside with a cup of coffee and cookies and simply sighed very heavily. At the dinner table, Leo admired the appearance of the dishes, but Amy then timidly asked Karen if he liked the food. She began to explain that this was not the issue, mentioning a number of difficulties. But suddenly the waiter intervened, promising that there would be an abundance of dessert, and the main character turned to him with a question whether too much had already been ordered. The waiter, with genuine horror, began to object, exclaiming that he did not understand what he had become for them. With unexpected fervor, he declared that Caron had brought down divine punishment on the Ville de Gaulle, which clearly embarrassed him. Karen asked with annoyance why he was being called a hero and not a thug, which clearly irritated him. Still, he admitted that the food was quite good. The conversation then smoothly moved on to the reasons why Amy's family ended up in debt to the Kiem family. She explained that her father had gotten involved in an unsuccessful business expansion, which had led to financial problems. Karen asked if the income from their lands was not enough, to which Amy gave an evasive answer. She explained that life was difficult for provincial nobles in the capital, and they needed additional sources of income. Hugo suggested that with her talent, she could gain the support of the Imperial Guard, but Amy refused. The reason was the need to choose a faction to receive patronage, which she was unable to do. Karen asked with genuine bewilderment, why not, receiving from Amy an indignant answer about the obviousness of the reasons. Amy declared passionately that Sir Kane, with his pride, would have chosen the path of the sword rather than politics, not knowing that Kane himself mentally refuted this, calling his life a struggle for survival. Then Amy stammered as she tried to get back to the topic of their conversation. Karen suddenly approached her with a direct offer to pay off her debt in full if she left with him. Amy, not understanding what he was talking about, asked for an explanation. Leo intervened sharply, accusing Karen of being no better than de Gaulle, offering to pay the debt in exchange for the woman. Karen, in his defense, denied saying anything like that, and Hugo reminded him of his respect for the honor of a future knight. The main character caught himself, declaring that he had originally meant something completely different. Confused, he finally blurted out his true proposal, an invitation for Emmy to join the High-Ran Knight Order. Hugo reproached Karen for changing his words, to which Karen was sincerely indignant, denying it. Amy politely but firmly declined Karen's offer, which clearly surprised him. He asked if she wanted to stay in the Imperial Guard to change the system from within, and received an affirmative answer. Karen admitted that he had expected such an answer, and Amy assumed that Sir Kane would have answered the same way. With a touch of irony, Karen noted that he himself was not the kind of person he was considered to be. He added that he nevertheless knew many people like Amy. Karen described such people as stubborn, straightforward, and foolishly devoted idealists. His memory flashed back to his own past command and his abrupt order to save their lives, not their honor. He mentally finished the scene, remembering their response, their vow to stand by their commander's side until the very end. What fools! The scene returned. When asked about the duel, Amy suddenly announced that she had changed her mind and was postponing the match. Instead, he suggested organizing an official match at the upcoming exchange tournament, which Amy thought was a good idea. As they said goodbye, everyone exchanged pleasantries and began to disperse. And Amy strictly ordered Corona to speak to her formally next time. After all, she was older. To this, Karen retorted that he only respected those who were stronger than him and offered to prove it in a match. Amy, with a determined look, promised to do her best to win. Later, in the head of the family's office, he mentioned that he had received a report from Hugo about the incident. Zevers asked Karen directly what had come into his head to beat the Count's son, to which Karen calmly replied that he was simply punishing the scoundrel. He expressed mild surprise that Karen would allow himself to do such a thing even in Hugo's presence, to which Karen replied that they got along well. Although, thanks to the victim's plea for leniency, there were no immediate problems. The man pointed out that Karen was now in everyone's sight. With a sigh, Zevris noted that it seemed he had repeated the same thing over and over again. He asked Karen to behave appropriately in the palace the next day, and he conditionally agreed, promising to restrain himself only in the presence of His Majesty. Karen promised to do this, swearing by his father's honor, which naturally raised the question of why not his own. Karen joked that he had no such thing as honor, and immediately changed the subject, turning to Zevris. He said that he had offered to join the order to the apprentice of the guard, Amy Altara, and Zevris confirmed that he knew this promising girl. When asked about her answer, Karen stated that he received a polite refusal, expressing regret about the lost talent for the guard. Karen then got to the point of his visit, asking to be connected with the head of the family. After all, he has a couple of things to talk about personally with his grandfather, and he sat and waited until the ball was brought to his grandfather, and at that time he looked and looked at the sky. Later, before the head of the family, Karen confirmed his challenge, and he assumed that since the request was so formal, the matter was serious. The head of the family guessed that the conversation would be about the affairs of their home, and allowed Karen to continue. Karen outlined his request to organize an official match with the Imperial Guard, which raised the question of the purpose. He explained his desire to cross swords and test his strength in direct confrontation, given his historical rivalry with the guards. The head of the family shrewdly asked if this was the only and true reason. Having received an affirmative answer from Karen, the head of the family gave his preliminary consent. However, he immediately stipulated that this agreement had one important condition. The condition was complete abstinence from any incidents until the end of the royal banquet after the presentation to His Majesty. When asked if he understood, Karen gave a formal confirmation. The head of the family concluded by once again urging Karen to watch his behavior in the palace. Karen noted to himself that holding out in silence for one day was not such a big problem. He added that he had not planned to make a scene. Inwardly, Karen concluded that this place, the palace, was also his grave in a past life. The scene suddenly changed to a fortress. Zeus knocked on the door of the head of the family's office, introducing himself before entering. After being allowed to enter, he reported that the official letter summoning him to the Imperial Guard, as Karen had requested, had been sent. The head of the family asked for an answer, and Zeus reported that the guard accepted the challenge without hesitation. After some thought, the head of the family concluded that since the Duke's grandson had issued the challenge, the enemy would be thoroughly prepared. Zeus cautiously asked his master if he was worried about Karen, to which he replied that the boy simply reminded him of Cain. Zeus respectfully asked if his master meant Sir Cain. The head of the family confirmed, adding that if that man were alive, the head and sect would not have to compete with the guards. He developed the idea of unnecessary rivalry, and Zeus asked if his master missed his old friend. The head of the family sharply rejected this idea, starting to question why he could miss someone who ignored his pleas, which shocked Zeus. He declared with feeling that he would never miss that scoundrel. Zeus changed the subject, asking if his master knew a knight named Amy Altara, and received confirmation. She was a squire in the Imperial Guard. Zeus explained that Karen wanted to recruit Amy into the Hareng Order, which raised the question of why. He explained that her talent was too good for the guard, and her almost obsessive respect for Cain played a role. Zeus noted that it was unusual for the young guard to speak openly about Cain, whose name they usually try not to mention. He added that without Cain's intervention, he might have been remembered as the greatest villain, and the guard prefers to erase that part of history. Zeus suggested that this was what had sparked Karen's curiosity, confirming his long-standing interest in Cain's identity. The head of the family asked if anything was known about Amy's family, and Zeus described them as modest provincial gentry. He added that, apart from changing his surname from Acti to Altura about 50 years ago, there was nothing remarkable, which surprised his master. He angrily asked what these same acts meant. Scene changed abruptly. At the entrance to the palace, Karen and Leo were met by a crowd praising the heroes of the Duke's House of Reston, the victors over the traitors. Leo asked Karen if he was embarrassed by all the attention, to which he only asked, why? Karen explained that this applause was not intended for them personally and advised them to ignore it. Leo asked Karen what all this meant and why such a performance was being staged. The protagonist explained that this was a palace-planned demonstration of the Reston family's support for the imperial house. When Leo asked him to clarify who this message was for, Karen gave a direct answer. He said the spectacle was staged for nobles who wanted to control the emperor. Suddenly, something distracted them. Karen looked out the window and noted with irony that even a puppet should have at least a minimal political sense. At the main gate, they were officially greeted as the Duke's honored sons. Karen addressed Knight Ryuk by name, which flattered him. Ryuk informed them of the rule prohibiting weapons from being brought into the main palace. Karan readily agreed to this stipulation. He asked his brother Leo if he knew that their grandfather had once broken this very rule. When Leo asked when it was, Karen replied that it was 50 years ago, stunning everyone. And for a moment everyone thought, 50 years ago. And then Leo, in a panic, tried to stop Karen, asking if he was crazy to bring this up now. Rook coughed dryly, hinting that they should watch their words before entering His Majesty's presence. And then the main character said with a smile that he would take this into account. Leo was again not delighted. Suddenly, one of the knights who was holding his sword simply fell to the floor. Enrique was shocked because he realized that all this happened precisely because of the sword's aura. Karen just proudly said, "Oops, it looks like his sword started acting up a bit." He flashed his eyes and said that his sword had character and they should be careful. Rick said that it was enough chatter. He would lead them to the main hall. The scene changed. Walking through the palace halls, Leo noted how luxurious everything around was, turning to his companion. But Karen did not answer his bro, no matter how much he addressed him. And this silence even began to harass and frighten Leo. And then he noticed how the main character's face changed and that his mana began to flow into the air. The knights present didn't seem to notice the strange aura emanating from Karen, which Leo mentally rejoiced at. Leo, watching his brother, saw for the first time on his face not anger, but some other unfamiliar expression. Leo remembered how his aunt asked him to closely monitor Karen's condition, using the word ocean, apparently describing his mana. She said that only he from the entire Chonghae fortress was able to understand certain things, which made Leo doubt his ability. He wondered if he would ever be able to understand Karen. But the protagonist himself was lost in his own thoughts. He recalled the battle. Suddenly, a cry for a fallen commander rang out, spreading panic among the soldiers. The order to retreat followed, and the soldiers began to retreat, abandoning the battlefield. He saw his lifeless body. Karen just thought that maybe he should stop thinking for a while, so as not to complicate the situation. At the entrance to the throne room, the master of ceremonies demanded that they state their names and titles. And then Ryuk said the names of the guests, and they were immediately allowed to go forward. Before entering the main hall, one of the servants loudly announced the arrival of Leo and Karen Reston from the Duke's House of Reston. And now entering the main hall, Karen thought of only one thing: how he longs to see the expression on the face of the heir who replaced the demon emperor. He walked further, and his face became more serious with each passing second. And entering inside, he saw a throne room and a man in interesting and expensive clothing. The man immediately greeted them at the imperial palace, and they were surprised. Who is this guy? The man in white formally welcomed them to the palace, apologizing that the emperor himself was unable to attend due to illness. The protagonist realized that he was the heir to the throne, and the prince said he could convey his words. Karen didn't even immediately believe that this was truly Crown Prince Jorn Karen. Karen greeted the High Prince, heir to the imperial throne. Leo, visibly nervous, expressed respect upon meeting the dignitary. The prince mentioned that he had heard of their feat, the victory over the evil spirits in the Bellis barony. He called their actions worthy of the grandchildren of a hero, to which the brothers responded modestly. Looking at the prince, the Yeast Karen noted his striking resemblance to someone. He continued his thought, clearly referring to the very same demon emperor who sold his soul to the devil. And he realized that the resemblance was quite natural, because he was his grandson, and he thought that it was better not to give in to emotions. Then the prince asked if it was true that they had become close to Revelio, to which Leo responded evasively. They were more likely acquaintances than friends. Karen immediately scolded Leo, asking if he had taken the prince's words as a pure compliment. Karen, on the contrary, replied that he valued the prince's high opinion of them. He said that he would certainly honor this friendship. He also promised that he would maintain good relations with Prince Revelio. He knew what he was talking about and smiled at his oratorical skills. Leo didn't understand what was wrong at all. He just shook his head from side to side. The prince told them to rest before the banquet began, and the brothers expressed their gratitude to him. He added that the banquet was organized in their honor, and they could have fun, to which they again thanked His Highness. The servant immediately offered to take them to the assigned chambers, and the brothers agreed. After they left, the prince stood and looked at the door, sighing quietly. The prince reiterated that he continued to maintain good relations with the sixth prince, Revelio. As he saw them off, the prince noted that Karen was indeed as interesting as the rumors said. In the corridor, he informed them that their weapons were securely stored in their quarters, addressing Karen specifically. Later in their quarters, Leo later asked sarcastically if their grandfather deserved recognition. Karen answered him positively. In the chambers, Leo asked Karen directly if it was true that their grandfather had overthrown the demon emperor. Karen cut him off abruptly, reminding him that such disrespectful words were forbidden even in his thoughts in the palace. He'd better check to see if there was a wiretap. Karen turned around and said that the emperor had personally participated in the coup. And then Leo also wondered why, in that case, the imperial family treated them with hostility. Gigi asked his brother why he thought so about the strained relationship with the imperial family. He cited the prince's behavior. Karen praised him, noting that he was finally starting to realize something, which surprised Leo. Gigi confessed to Karen that when he bragged about his friendship with the sixth prince, he wanted to punch him in the face. However, he added that the prince's strange look earlier definitely meant something else. Leo asked why. Revelio immediately ran into the room and stated bluntly that it was all because of their relationship with the Marquisate of Diaz on their mother's side. Hugo, turning to his brothers, asked how they had been doing while they were in the palace. He paid Karen an unexpected compliment, noting that he looked quite decent in ceremonial clothes. At this moment, Leo announced with respectful fear the arrival of His Highness the Sixth Prince, and Karan mentally called him annoying. Rayo immediately developed the idea, recalling that, as he had said in You, the imperial family disliked the Reston house precisely because of this union. Revelio added that whether they liked it or not, the Reston house would soon have to take action, and it felt like a return to the past. He made a cryptic reference to some imperial tradition, which prompted a question from Karen. The prince explained that the tradition was for the son to overthrow his father and take the throne, and he considered this obvious. He also noted that the current moment for such actions was almost ideal. He began to reveal the details, saying that this event was ideal for their purposes, since even the county of Kiel relied on the influence of the Marquisate of Diaz. He continued, stating that the influence of the Marquisate of Diaz would attract all the capital's nobles to the banquet. Revelio declared that, thanks to Karen, the upcoming banquet would be even more lively. He asked Karen point blank if he wanted to cause chaos, to which Karen responded by asking what exactly he meant. It seemed like he was the only one looking for fun here. Revelio countered that it was Karen who wanted to have fun, and suggested creating conditions in which Karen could do whatever he wanted, and asked if he was interested. He asked directly if Karen would join his plan, but he asked to hear the plan itself first, and Rio agreed. Leo, finally realizing the scale of the plan, exclaimed in horror that it was madness to create a disturbance at the imperial banquet. Then the scene suddenly shifted to a ball. Leo, distracted, admired the number of beautiful ladies at the banquet. His eyes literally ran wild at this whole celebration of life. Karen sharply urged him to pull himself together, to which Leo justified himself by saying that he hadn't been to such events for a long time. Inwardly, Karen compared the current reception with the past, remembering how no one had welcomed him, a former slave, back then. Suddenly, he felt something in the air, literally a sharp aura, and at that very moment, the sword, turning to its owner, muttered something embarrassedly, continuing to look around. Karen sensed something strange, and the sword confirmed the feeling was mutual. He tensed internally, determining that this aura was definitely black magic. Guillotine, the demonic sword, mentally confirmed Karen's guess, shouting about the presence of black magic. Karen tensed internally as he sensed the disturbing energy of black magic within the imperial palace. He noted to himself that protective charms were placed everywhere, and it would take extraordinary strength to bypass them. This observation led him to the conclusion that the source of this energy was definitely not something ordinary. Among the banquet guests, someone noticed the brothers and confirmed that they were indeed the Restons. Leo could not hide his amazement at the huge gathering of nobles and girls, turning to Karen for confirmation. Karen reprimanded him, considering such behavior to be rustic and shameful, to which Leo began to justify himself. One of the guests noted with irony that laudatory speeches in honor of the brothers were spreading throughout the capital. Another guest added that they were well worthy of the title of Wolves of House Reston. A man approached them and introduced himself as Karim of the Marquisate of Diaz. Karen briefly introduced himself in response, stating his name and shaking his hand. Karim noted with disdain that Karan had no manners at all. Leo whispered and tried to teach Karen etiquette, reminding him to look him in the eye when shaking hands. Leo, trying to smooth things over, suggested that Karen must be nervous at such a big banquet, and introduced himself to Karim. Karim responded to the greeting with cold politeness, but immediately reproached Karen for rudeness unworthy of the Duke's grandson. He conveyed his father's gratitude to them for subduing those bandits. He continued his thought, calling the risk of life for the emperor's people a worthy act. Someone approached them. Another nobleman intervened, calling their actions worthy of the empire's greatest loyal subjects. The same nobleman noted that the brothers were quite different from the capital's nobility. Revelio, appearing nearby, added sarcastically that they did not look like those who cling to the imperial family for the sake of power. The nobleman present formally greeted the arriving sixth prince. Karim hissed furiously, claiming that Revelio was some kind of half-breed to speak like that. Karim tried to intervene, reminding them that this was a meeting of nobles loyal to his majesty, but Revelio only mockingly apologized. The prince smiled and referred to his simple blood, which sometimes makes him say too much. At this time, the main character was still standing and experiencing a strange feeling. He scanned the entire room for the source of the aura and finally found it. She sat with a good hairstyle, a mask on her face, and interesting earrings. And as soon as he accurately identified her as the source of the aura, she sharply turned her gaze to him. He realized that the source was somewhere here among people. It was coming from this woman. Rayo continued to loudly and solemnly welcome Karen and Leo Reston to the palace. Karim tried to point out to the prince that they had already spoken, but Revelio declared that it was more fun in company. Karim began to speak of conversations intended only for the servants of the throne, and Revelio mockingly asked if he was teaching them who was at the center of power. The prince mockingly replied that even a stray dog knew that the true center was the Marquisate of Diaz. Karim hesitated and began to deny it in confusion, clearly not intending for his words to be taken that way. The protagonist's composure finally ran out, and he shouted at Karim, accusing him of not stopping his dirty talk. Karen interrupted the tirade with a cold, threatening suggestion that the aristocrat simply shut up and drew his blade. Leo could only watch in stunned disbelief at what his brother was about to do. Karen turned to the sixth prince and dryly informed him that their little performance was over. When the prince asked why they were stopping, Karan revealed that there was a rat hiding among them who used black magic. The prince began to suggest that it would be safer to call the Imperial Guard. But Karen interrupted him, asking for time. People around were already looking at them and whispering. Karen reminded the prince of his family's infamous motto about demons belonging to the Restons and asked about his role. He gave clear instructions to seal off the area and prevent anyone from escaping, admitting that he could not hold it for long. Karen started to leave, but Karim stood in front of him and asked him to stop for a second. The guy immediately warned the bastard not to interfere with him as he prepared to confront the hidden threat. And he went on, leaving behind only silence, shock, and the remnants of his furious aura. Karim reluctantly admitted that he was so shocked that he couldn't even draw his sword. The pressure emanating from Karen was so strong that it suffocated the entire hall. The stunned guest could only express his complete bewilderment at the kind of person Karen really was. Leo watched his brother's determined advance and called out to him, asking what he was going to do. Panic broke out among the nobles as someone shouted in confusion about what was happening. The sixth prince showed the illusory artifact that Pora had given him for emergencies, explaining that it was magic. He claimed the artifact would give them the time they needed for the Imperial Guard to arrive. Leo, still trying to understand the plan, asked why they needed to stall for time. A grim smile appeared on Karen's lips as he remembered the old saying that doctors destroy diseases and Restons destroy demons. Karen mentally stated that he expected a cold reception in the capital, since their family was an eyesore. Leo wondered what it all meant. The girl took off her mask and said with surprise that someone here did greet her, but not in the way she expected. Inwardly, Karen rejected the idea that this was a human being in front of him, recognizing him as something else. The demon, noticing him, mockingly congratulated him on the fact that he had managed to find him after all. The demon praised him, declaring that such power was truly worthy of Duke Galo's blood. She added mockingly that she was worried Karen would find her. Someone present exclaimed in horror upon seeing the destruction of the magical barrier. The demon, looking at Karen, recognized his external attractiveness and expressed her sympathy. Karen shouted furiously at the demon not to dare do anything, and with one movement he cut off her head so that blood sprayed all those present around. and the head itself fell to the ground in front of the guests, and frightened everyone present with her appearance. But even with her head cut off, Demon continued her sinister compliments, declaring that Karen was truly beautiful. The girls in front of whom the head was almost fainted. And the hall of guests, gripped by horror, finally realized that before them was not a man, but a real monster. And now Karen understood for sure that there was a real demon in front of him. Immediately, the head of the demoness on the ground dissolved into thin air, and the wind carried the petals away while the protagonist watched. He realized that these were not just body parts, but some kind of magical substance. Karen internally noted that the regenerative abilities of the demon he had encountered were far from perfect. The girl herself confirmed this, and now her head is back in place. The demon realized with surprise that Karen's sword was somehow absorbing his own mana. The creature claimed to be unaware of the Reston family's abilities and mockingly called Karen lucky. Otherwise, he would already be dead. The demon regretfully admitted that he would have liked to devour Karen right then and there, but considered it premature. And what a pity! The girl immediately rushed forward with an attack at the main character. She knew how to change her mana and shape weapons. Now a huge blade of aura was aimed at the main character, and the main character couldn't dodge. The blade quickly approached his neck. He carefully slashed his neck so that the next moment blood spurted out. Having delivered the blow, the demon still managed to lick Karen, noting with pleasure that he tasted sweet. Leo and Revelio cursed in anger as they watched what was happening. Leo wanted to rush forward with his sword, but Revelio suddenly stopped him. The prince explained that this fight belonged only to Karen. He held Leo back, reminding him that he knew Karen better than anyone, and if he needed help, he would have asked for it himself. Leo bitterly regretted his weakness and even trembled with resentment, but the prince gently put him down, saying that now was not the time. Revelio told Leo that he would become stronger one day, but if he met that demon now, only one thing would happen to him. He finished his thought by bluntly stating that Leo would simply die for no purpose. The demon's aura enveloped the entire room and instilled fear in every person in it. Guillotine, the demon's sword, turned to Karen, claiming that the demon was too strong for him. The sword warned that if Karen continued to fight, he would simply die a useless death. Karen defiantly asked the sword about the useless death, stating that if this was the price for his beliefs, he remembered his past life and concluded with cold determination that even such a death was not so bad. Karen resolutely resolved to continue the fight. He opened his eyes and once again fixed his sights on the demon before him. Taking a stand, he realized that there was no way he could let her go. The demon admired the incredible expression of hatred in Karen's eyes. She noted with a sneer that it was surprising to see such rage in the eyes of a mere mortal. The demon girl rushed at him with her bloodlust, admiringly admitting that the Reston blood was indeed something special. She emitted her aura, full of death, straight towards the protagonist and other people. The part of the aura that hit the guests pretty much cut everyone up indiscriminately, both women and children. The demon introduced herself as Shunya and promised that Karen would remember her name for the rest of his life. The main character realized with horror that other guests at the banquet were also suffering from the scattering rays of aura. The sixth prince immediately shouted at Karen to get his attention. Activating his green aura, he ordered Karen not to be distracted by them and to continue his work. Karen parried the blow, and the girl sarcastically asked if he hoped to relax after one successful dodge. Shunya reminded that her petals were not just decoration, but part of her deadly magic. Seeing that Karen did not dodge another attack, the sword screamed in horror, but it was too late. Leo cried out, realizing that Karen's actions were recklessly dangerous. The name of the attack that Karen was preparing to carry out appeared in the air. This was the fifth form of the Hirang sword style, at the limit of its capabilities. Gathering all his willpower, Karen used the extremely dangerous full tide technique, forcing his mana to work to its limits. The demon girl looked at him in surprise. She didn't expect the boy to be so full of mana. This forced release of mana was hard on him, causing him to cough up blood onto the floor. His sword guillotine screamed that Karen's body could not withstand such a load, but he ignored the warning. Karen stated that he didn't care as long as he could pierce the demon's heart. Shunya, seeing his willingness to go all the way, was completely delighted, and she expressed genuine admiration for the strength and will of the little warrior. The sixth prince noted with alarm that the illusion spell that had hidden the hall had already been completely destroyed. One of the guests asked in panic why the Imperial Guard had not yet appeared. The general confusion and shouting reflected the complete incomprehension and horror of what was happening. One of the guards reported to Knight Ryuka about a powerful surge of magic in the banquet hall, which shocked him. When asked about the mages from the tower, the answer was that they had already arrived through the portal due to the criticality of the situation. Rook, cursing the use of magic right in the palace during a banquet, gave the order to his squad to move out. Approaching the doors, Ryuk remembered that today, in fact, His Majesty was holding a banquet. And approaching the other soldiers, he angrily demanded an explanation as to why the hall had not yet been stormed. A shocking answer followed. Magicians cannot break the barrier created by very powerful dark magic. The magicians emphasized that this was not ordinary witchcraft, but something much more ancient and dangerous. Hearing the words "a dark magic," Ryuk froze in complete bewilderment and horror, not understanding what a nightmare is happening in this place. Meanwhile, inside the hall, Demon Shinya, remembering his king's prohibition, told that sweet boy Karen that she would not kill him. With a sneer, she told the little warrior not to worry, and she suggested prolonging their deadly game and enjoying it longer. And then the main character tensed up even more and squeezed the sword, filling it with aura. And then he quickly attacked in front of him, cutting through the deadly petals. But the girl was already on top and was diving at the main character with a crazy smile. Karen clearly didn't like this. The girl was too fast. Karen noted with annoyance that he had no room left to maneuver or evade. But then he remembered the words of his master that it was impossible to control the power of the sea at will. The guy understood that the power of the sea, especially one as stormy as his, could only be accepted. And so now he just stood there quietly as the demon girl moved closer and closer to him. Leo looked at all this in horror and shouted at Karen to finally start dodging. And the demoness's eyes became even more insane, and she released her demonic claws forward. And she was almost ready to tear Karen in two. At that time, Leo was already drawing his sword from its sheath. The next moment, in addition to the petals, drops of blood also appeared in the air. Demon Shinya admitted that Karen had indeed surprised her, and that she had expected such a powerful release of power from him. However, what struck her was that he was deliberately exposing himself to attacks just to create an opening for attack. With caustic admiration, she called such a decision recklessly bold for a simple puppy. And the very next second, the guy delivered his deadly blow, effortlessly cutting the demon's body into two parts. Shinya repeated once again that Karen was giving her incredible pleasure. Finally, her attention was completely drawn to the sword in his hands, and she seemed to understand its nature. Shinya was surprised to recognize that before her was the legendary devouring blade, and the sword confirmed its ability to absorb dark mana. Guillotine explained that the more demonic blood absorbed, the more power it could transfer to its wielder. At that moment, the barrier around the hall collapsed, and the sword informed Karen that the demon in front of him was not its true physical form. Karen agreed with this, logically assuming that the demon's real body could not be freely roaming around the palace. At this time, Rook ordered everyone to clear the way, as one demon still posed a threat. Karen, meanwhile, promised Shinya that he would find a real body beyond the North Sea and tear it to pieces. The demon merely laughed in response and promised to wait for him there. She added that even her king would be looking forward to this meeting. And then finally it disappeared beautifully, exploding right in the very center of the hall. A stunned Ryuk screamed the word demon in horror as he realized the scale of what had happened. He whispered that a demon had entered the imperial palace, and someone from the crowd said that he himself had been on the verge of death. A couple of the ladies noted to themselves that they only survived thanks to the magical protection of the sixth prince, and he admitted with surprise that the bastard had turned out to be useful. There was a murmur of surprise in the hall as the prince used magic, which was unusual. Rook was also in shock. His assistant turned to him, and a tense but quiet dialogue ensued between them, the meaning of which was unclear to those around him. Karen stood in the middle of the hall, losing strength, muttering that he had lost too much blood, and his condition was causing Leo concern. Leo ran up and offered to help Karen, but he rudely refused, telling them to leave him alone. The prince objected that now was the time for fuss, and handed Karen a small object. Karen asked suspiciously if they were trying to feed him some kind of junk, and the prince proudly presented the elixir of the dew of the world tree. Karen admitted that he knew about the potion's incredible rarity, but the prince insisted that if he had decided to invest in it, he would do it properly. The prince told him to simply drink it, and Karan silently noted the legendary properties of this elven elixir, which restores mana, Karen concluded that with such a means, he would not have to worry about the consequences of forcibly revealing his mana. He thanked the prince for his help, promising not to forget this debt, and the prince in response demanded that he remember it exactly. Karen offered to deal with the consequences himself and told Leo to go and report everything to his grandfather. But he refused, insisting on his brother's immediate rest. And the very next second, the sixth prince slapped the main character hard. The prince noticed with irritation that he was being forced to act rudely, and Leo asked with alarm what was going on. The prince reassured him, saying that he had simply knocked someone out and informed him that Duke Gallo should already be at the palace. He explained that protocol required the ducal house to intervene if traces of dark mana were discovered in the palace, which shocked Leo. And then Ryuk approached them with his retinue and officially announced to the sixth prince that he was arrested as a suspect in rebellion. Leo indignantly rejected the accusation, calling it absurd. Reo reassured Leo, saying he'd expected everything and refused outside help, declaring he'd go on his own. Ryuk, seeing his determination, meekly agreed to his terms. Reo firmly declared his innocence, but Ryuk doubted the words of someone who secretly studied forbidden magic. The sixth prince declared that his personal hand in this game was over, and now it was the turn of House Reston to act. He called out to Leo, addressing him as a younger brother. Before leaving, the prince instructed Leo to be sure to inform Duke Gallo that he had helped them, after which he agreed to follow Ryuk. The heavy boots were carried out of the hall. Leo, left alone, cursed in complete confusion, trying to make sense of all the chaos that had just happened. Elsewhere in the palace, Duke Gallo, addressing the crown prince, dryly remarked that now was not the time for formalities. The crown prince tried to complain about the duke's insolence, but he began to talk about the agreement between the Duchy of Reston and the imperial family. The duke reminded that, according to this pact, the House of Reston was obliged to eliminate any enemies who had penetrated the palace. However, before doing this, the duke firmly stated that he would first take care of his grandchildren. Having finished his thought, Duke Gallo looked questioningly at the crown prince, expecting and not allowing any objections.